Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is 4S. I'm David Johnson, and today we have Clint Haycock. Let's get started. How you doing, Clint?
Really good. Yeah, I feel like it's old home week, isn't it? We did an episode on your show and then we turned around and did one for mine, which is coming out in a couple of months, and then now we're back. So, yeah, this is really good. I'm excited to dive into this today.
Yeah, look, if I had my way, we 2 weeks wouldn't go by that we didn't have a show together. So that's just
I'm
me.
up for it.
I love doing shows with Clint. He and I have similar backgrounds, and even with those similar backgrounds, our backgrounds are different enough so that we bring um, very different perspectives. Clint also has, excuse me, a little bit more of a seminarian perspective on the Bible than I do. He's also just smarter. So I I like having smart people on the show. So Clint, just consider yourself a regular, a co-host who sometimes shows up.
I'll take that. Well, I
Okay.
was gonna say, commenting about your thing about me being a seminarian and all that. Yes, I went to Bible college, seminary, did a PhD in religious studies, blah blah blah. But I've walked away from it all like you did. But people ask me a lot, like, what is it? What does all that mean? What does all those years of study and money spent and time spent and effort spent in study and ministry and everything else if you walked away from it all? And I say, this is exactly why I'm doing this with you, because that's my way to sort of give back to the community, as it were, to put all this education into practice, helping people to get out, which is not why I went to Bible college and seminary, of course, in the first place. But it's an ironic sort of twist of fate.
Yes. All right. So today we have on the screen a dude who you may or may not recognize. His name is Joel. I do not know his last name. I don't know if he ever gives it. Joel is he has some experience in comedy, also in uh, church Bible philosophy, but he's a funny man. And he has, friends who join him, a little bit of a network. But I love his stuff. Some of his stuff, if you like this video and you think, oh, I want to watch more of his stuff, but you're not really familiar with his stuff, some of it is not safe for work. You will get your ass fired if you if you play this stuff out loud, because he works blue quite frequently.
So
So
don't put it on the speaker when you're at work.
right,
Put the headphones in.
you might want to, just scan through it before you play it in your house around small children. If you don't want your small children to hear some things.
That just means you and I can swear on the show, though.
Oh yeah, no, I look. I work blue all the time, so
Oh,
no
good.
one, no one is shocked by my blueness. Um, but I just letting people know, if you're not familiar with Joel, but there's nothing blue here. All right, which is true on about probably 3/4 of the stuff that he does. So that said, uh, Bible fails. You also see that on the screen, but if you're looking at the title, Popular Christian Pro-Slavery Apologetics Debunked. And the reason we're doing this video is because it is Slavery Week in the Summer of Morality. You can't do a series called The Summer of Morality without doing slavery, okay? That has to have its own week. And so it's like Shark Week on Discovery. This is Slavery Week. This is a week that I suspect the freaks will come out. That said, DCT, that's been a fantastic week on the board. I just posted secular morality. So this is kind of being time shifted because I'm recording this on the same day that I post it last week's show from your perspective. But
Right.
this is the reason this is different is because Joel is an atheist. And normally I do Christians and debunk their arguments. I don't do atheists debunking Christian arguments because that's repetitive.
Yeah. Are you feeling okay, David? Are you sure everything's okay over there?
I, I'm fine.
Oh, good.
I'm
I was a bit
fine.
worried about you there for a minute. Thought you were going for the easy win, you know.
No. The people
From
in
William Lane Craig to this guy.
yeah, well, the people in the mushrooms say everything is okay.
Hmm.
Um, so
Right.
don't worry about it. So I'm doing this one for two reasons. One, this is one of the best slavery debunking videos out there, and I just want more people to see it. And secondly, I just kind of refuse to platform a pro-slavery person on the channel. And there are lots of Christians who say lots of stupid things about slavery. We have discussed the issue on my show, and we've had the debates, and I kind of regret doing them because
Yeah, keep it American. You don't want to platform those kind of people.
yeah, I just don't. I love them. I'll talk to them about other issues, but it's kind of like platforming a person who is pro-white supremacist. I mean, they may be nice, good Christian people. Would you platform that person? I don't.
Exactly.
I mean, Andrew would. He claims to be able to talk to
You can
anybody.
stomach that.
Yeah. Sam Harris would. He talks to Nazis. Right. I don't. I draw a line at places, and you can say that my line is arbitrary, and you'd be right. Okay, my line is arbitrary. It's based on how I feel
Yeah, you
about
got to
the
draw a
issue.
line somewhere.
Yep. And
Well, I was going
so,
to say too, yeah, you and I, we just did a recording that's coming out, the one on my show, and we delved heavily into slavery, which we've done before.
yeah.
Because a few years ago, I did a big, massive series on Doug Wilson out of Moscow, Idaho, and one of the episodes you and I did, we went through because he's a pro-slavery Christian apologist, and I had to platform him because it was a series on Doug Wilson. But if people want to find out more about that, they can head over to my show as well and find out the episodes that you and I did on this.
Yeah. Well, look, and I just want to be clear. I'm not saying it's wrong to, deal with these people directly and deal with their arguments. Somebody should. People should do it.
Yeah, you need to debunk them.
Yeah. It's just, I don't want to do it. So, because I've done it so much, and I've done it not just with people on video, but I've done it with Christians that I consider friends, and I can't.
Just can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. So that's it. And who knows? Maybe I'll do it next, sometime during this week, and I'll make an exception. I don't know, but this is just one thing. So the thing about slavery, and the reason it keeps coming up in atheist arguments against Christianity and the Christian God, is because it's so egregious and so
Mm.
obvious. You talk about the low-hanging fruit. This is the lowest hanging fruit there is.
Right, it's dragging on the floor. It's
It
that low,
it
isn't
it is.
it?
And so even if you don't know your Bible very well and you're an atheist, you still know this argument. You know that the God of the Bible supported slavery. And by the way, every Christian, even if they don't know their Bible well, knows this. And so one of the unique and interesting aspects of the slavery debate, and I'm just going to say this, and I'll take the arrows and slings for it. You don't have to, Clint. I'm
Good.
gonna say this, and
We'll take the hit.
I'm gonna own it. Every Christian who ever argued with an atheist on the subject of slavery and pretending that the Bible is still okay and the God of the Bible is okay, they are lying. They're lying. They may be self-deceived, but that's still a lie. They've lied to themselves. But I think that they're being so disingenuous, they're not just lying to themselves. They're lying to the public. And they have to lie. They have to do it because it would destroy any hope of Christianity. And so Christians have to become pro-slavery shills, and
Mm-hmm.
they have to pretend that they're not, and they have cognitive dissonance. But the only way to do it is to lie, and I'll talk about that a little bit through the video. I'm going to have fairly long swaths of video where I don't cut in.
Wow,
Big,
that's
yeah,
unusual for you.
it is, and
I'm shocked.
I
You
think
say that now, though, but
I
I don't
know,
believe it.
I know. So I just listened to this whole thing before the show, and
Oh, you did?
and I thought about, okay, I'm probably going to cut in here. No, I can have discipline. I can wait. And the thing is, if there's an argument, if there's a point you want to make, Joel's probably going to get to it. Um,
But you just let it run.
yeah, so I'm gonna let a lot of this run. So again, that's going to be another difference in this video, and I will. There is one place in Joel's arguments where I'm going to say he missed a trick.
Right.
He. This is, I think, the only place where he really missed it. And so I've got a couple of Bible verses that I'm going to read that Joel surprisingly does not. I don't know how he missed it, but we'll get there. So with that, we've done a lot of palaver, but I just wanted to set the stage.
You
And
need the context, don't you?
yes, and so Clint, whenever you want to break in, just start talking. Tell me to stop. Whatever needs to be done. Um, and let's
Well, I
do.
was just gonna
Hmm?
say before you hit play, I
Huh?
have to jump in. You were talking about, you said earlier you'll take the slings and arrows because you say Christians are lying when they defend slavery from the Bible because they have to. But I mean, I think I would nuance that a little bit because when I was an evangelical, I was really big into apologetics and I looked into this whole thing. I mean, we talked about theodicy in the last video. How can you defend what's seemingly indefensible? But of course they do. And that one of the biggest answers I've seen is, and we've talked about this before, they'll say, no, it wasn't chattel slavery, it was indentured servitude. So there's ways around it, I think, for them. Otherwise, they'd have to admit that it's monstrously evil. That's all they can do is to soften it, to make it less monstrously evil.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think, isn't that right? I mean, if you're going to be honest with the Bible and say, look, it does say that, uses the word slavery and so forth, we've got to come up with a way to explain it away and somehow still worship and serve the God that we're going to go to church on Sunday and sing about how he's loving and all the rest of it. Because you otherwise you can't stay a Christian. You just can't and be intellectually honest with yourself. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that in this episode as well.
Yes, and the one thing that I want to do with each of these points, so I'm gonna one of the stopping places is with each point. He has 10 points. I'm gonna stop at the end of his point,
Right. So let him
and
say his piece.
right, and then we're going to maybe have a little bit of discussion on how we thought about
Yeah.
this issue and that point,
Right.
and how we treated it. And so,
Is he being fair and all that? Yeah.
right. And so I'm just going to show you right now from my perspective. I didn't think I was lying at the time, but I was lying.
Yeah.
I can own that. And I'm not going to say I was mistaken. I'm going to say I was lying. And so
Straight up.
yeah, straight up. And so I'll maybe talk about that through this. So my goal, we'll try to let him get through each point, and then we'll share our experience with that point and see if we have any insights to add. But the one thing that I will ask is, don't jump ahead to other points or other theodicies or ideas. Let's just stick
Yeah.
with
Deal with that one.
yeah. All right, here we go.
So it's just a dumb apologetic that never works. So really, just stop saying it. Just stop saying it. Hey folks, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel and I read Bible so that you don't have to. Typically I'm reading full chapters of the Bible, but today I'm taking a break from that to do a super special episode, which is debunking 10 of the popular slavery apologetics that Christians give to excuse the slavery in the Bible. There are a lot more than 10, and I'll probably do a part 2 if people like this video. But for now, we're just going to do these 10, and stay tuned till the end because I have a counter apologetic apologetic that you probably have never heard before. This is something that I noticed that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about. So you want to stick around and hear the debunking of the 10th slavery apologetic in this video. Now, there are videos that are going to go into great detail speaking about these slavery apologetics. One of those videos done by my dear friend Justin from the Deconstruction Zone. He's joined by Dr. Josh Bowen and Dr. Kip Davis to have a conversation about this very topic. Click the link in the description and go and watch that full video. Now, what's really interesting is that we have to do this, that people who are not Christians or ex-Christians like myself have to talk about how slavery is bad and why slavery in the Bible is bad. And obviously, Christians don't want that to be true because it does undermine God, right? Because God is supposed to be good. But it is weird that the result of that becomes them defending slavery, it seems like. And that's the really, really weird thing that happens. So if you want to leave a comment and you're a Christian, please do. But know that if you're going to be defending slavery, you're not on the right side of history with that.
Okay, so that's not one of his points, and I have stopped the tape.
You said you were going to let it run.
Listen, I'm trying so hard.
Not very hard.
So the thing though that I think is worth highlighting is, isn't it interesting that we even have to have the discussion? Isn't it interesting that the argument
37 minutes talking about it
even exists among modern people? So, for instance, if you take those same Christians who are going to be defending slavery and all of their theodicies and so forth, they will also, if they know anything about Islam, decry what's his face? Muhammad, thank you. They will.
What he did.
That's right. They would decry Muhammad for instance, having child wives.
Right.
All right. They do not go through any kind of contortions to defend or steelman the child wives of Muhammad. They just look at it and categorically say, that's wrong. And they will say, therefore, Muhammad is wrong and Allah is wrong and Islam is bad. They're case closed. They have no problem doing that. No problem at all. When it comes to slavery, because that's their bugaboo. That's the skeleton in their closet. Notice they don't treat it the same way.
Yeah, they have a different hermeneutic, basically.
But the fact that they even have a hermeneutic, I think, is a stretch too far. Because once again, with the child brides of Muhammad, they're not worried about a hermeneutic. He had child brides, done. They don't care. Yeah. They're not. There's no reason for scholarly research there. Child brides is wrong. Muhammad had child brides. Muhammad was prophet of Allah. It's wrong. That's as far as it goes with him. And so when the atheist comes up and says, well, but God promoted slavery, and suddenly the Christians become energetic apologists.
Well, they have to.
For a terrible thing. And even in this time, this year of 2025, in case this recording is still around 100 years later, in 2025, good Christians are still defending biblical slavery, where in the same way that good Muslims defend Muhammad's child brides. And so the fact that we even have to have this conversation depicts, I think, how religion poisons minds.
Yeah, it poisons everything. That's what Hitchens said. But, if you look at Doug Wilson's book, Southern Slavery as It Was, it's really interesting because it's only a little book. It's about 35, 40 pages long. And what he says at the beginning, he says, actually, this book isn't about defending slavery. He says it's about defending inerrancy. And he says, because the Bible clearly condones slavery. But if it's inerrant and without error in everything it affirms, we therefore must defend slavery because the Bible's inerrant. So therefore, we can't allow any crack to slip in there. If you're going to allow slavery and say, well, or just excuse it away on some other grounds, then he says you've opened the door. It's a sliding, slippery slope for denying the inerrancy of the Bible. So there, that was his hermeneutic. They had to defend it because the Bible is without error, and it's the book that God, essentially dictated more or less to humans.
Right. Well, theologically, I agree with him. So,
If you're going to go down that line, you have to be consistent.
right, you have to defend every kind of monstrous thing that's there. And so, just commenting on the his observation and amplifying it, isn't it amazing that we are still having to argue the issue of slavery in 2025? Let's hear out Joel's first point.
You really should be abandoning the dogmatic belief in a God that promotes slavery rather than fighting for slavery. You know what I mean? I also wanted to mention that I'll probably get a myriad of comments saying that this is just my subjective morality. I do think that slavery is wrong, that taking away a person's autonomy is certainly not a good thing, not good for their well-being at all, and very harmful. And a lot of Christians are going to say, well, you can't just say that. That's your subjective opinion. You don't have objective morality. You need objective morality in order to say literally any sort of moral statement, which just isn't true. But just so you know, for anyone that's going to be reading the comments, and we're probably going to see something like that, and if you're ever in a debate where you hear a Christian say this, when a Christian talks about objective morality, they've lost. What's happened is they agree with you, they've hit a wall, they can't go any further, so they say your morality is subjective. That's them losing the debate. They know that the Bible is completely disgusting and immoral. They can't answer to it. So they say, well, your morality is subjective, so you can't even say anything. You have no grounding for it, so everybody gets to go home. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware. I understand the moral argument, and at some point I'll make a whole video about the moral argument. For now, we're not going to talk about that. We'll just say that I understand morality is subjective, but for me, my subjective morality, I think slavery is wrong. You guys might have a different opinion. If you're watching this video and you go, slavery is very, very good, and the Bible does condone slavery, and I like it, this video is not for you. I disagree with you, and I think that you should go live on an island somewhere and leave the rest of us alone. But for those of you who agree that slavery is wrong, the Bible condones slavery. So let's get into it. So a first very popular apologetic is that the word slave doesn't mean slave. The word that they use for slave in Hebrew, which is eved, I believe, doesn't mean slave. Like, it's just not a word that means slave. And that's just not true. I mean, you can just look up like slave in Hebrew and you'll see that is eved. Now, of course, it means servant as well. It means many different types of slave, right? It doesn't just mean like a chattel slave, but it does mean chattel slave sometimes. But if you read a passage and it has the word slave, if you just say like, let's just change that word and then it fixes everything, it doesn't. And I'll give you a good example of that. And we'll go to Leviticus 25, verse 44 to 46, where we'll do a game where it's like we remove the word and you can tell me what word would best fit into the context of this verse or these verses, right? As for the male and female blank, whom you may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female blanks. Okay, so we can buy them. We can buy male and female something. Maybe it's going to be goats. Maybe it's going to be bulls or something like that. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and their families who are with you and have been born in your land. They may be your property. Okay, so it doesn't seem like animals, because aliens, that's going to be people. They're never going to say alien bulls or alien goats. So it has to be people, or if they have families, you never like, look at that family of goats. You'd rarely use that term. So they're born in your land and they may be your property. Okay, you're owning them. So what would the male and female, something that you own that are people, you may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property. These you may treat as blank, but as for your fellow Israelites, no one shall rule over the other with harshness. So we have 3 blanks in this. It seems like these are people who are going to be owned as possessions and as property, and they're going to be passed down to children. What word would you put in there, right? Or does it matter? Like, does it matter the word? Because at this point, we know through the context of all the other words that this is a person that's being owned for life and passed down as property. That's a chattel slave. That's the definition of chattel slavery. So the semantic argument that you're making fails because we don't need to worry so much about one single word. We can change that word to friend and it doesn't make it any better, right? As for the male and female friends whom you may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female friends. That's actually kind of a nice verse. You can be friends with people anywhere. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and from their families who are with you who have been born in your land. They may be your property. Now it gets weird. Now we actually have to find out what the Hebrew word is for property, because friends aren't your property, are they? And now acquire seems a little bit different. Does acquire mean buy? You may buy, because we don't want to buy friends. We want to acquire them by being friendly with them, right? I mean, this is the NRSVUE. Some translations do say buy. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property. So it was nice for a bit there. We were just acquiring friends, but now we understand that these friends are possessions and they're being inherited by our children. This doesn't feel quite as good as it did at the beginning. But my point is that changing the one word doesn't change all the other words. So it would be good for Christians to just stop using that apologetic, because it doesn't really do anything for anyone. The word aved within context can mean chattel slave or any other kind of slavery. And that's the second of the apologetics that we're going to look at today.
Okay. I thought
You're already laughing.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah. Fill in the blanks.
Right. I remember one debate in particular where my interlocutor tried to live in the word eved and say
it wasn't slavery.
Which I'm just going to say, and I love this person dearly. I did then, I do now, and so I almost hate to bring it up because my audience will know who I'm talking about. But that person was lying, and anyone who ever used this argument is lying, because they know the Bible well enough to have a concordance. And they know it well enough to look up, Strong's numbers and
commentaries and all that.
Right. So they recognize the Bible. They're not stupid people. And they look at this word eved and see the various things it can mean. And they pick out the one that is most innocent.
Right.
But there are, I say, 0 people who have that much Bible knowledge who honestly believe that no slavery existed under God's law. They know better.
Yeah, chattel slavery.
Right. They know this. In fact, I have talked to 0 people. And I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to 0 people who were on the ball enough to know the word eved, who didn't also know the rest of the text that described chattel slavery. So they are simply trying to get into an academic fog so that Christians who don't know this part of the Bible will say, oh, well, that Christian said that the word doesn't mean slavery at all. It just means servant.
Mm.
They are lying to their audience to try to save God from slavery. Now let me put that in modern day terms. Another word that you could use that Eved would cover would be worker.
Right.
Right. And even if you say, well, nah, Eved can't possibly cover worker. Our language covers worker, slave, servant, worker. Same stuff. Same stuff. So in the antebellum South, they could have talked about their field workers,
Yeah.
right? No one, though, who knows the history of slavery in America would say, well, slavery didn't exist. They were just workers,
They
right?
just didn't have to get paid.
Right?
They were working for
They're
free,
just
but
workers.
they were
They were
still
servants,
workers.
right? So that's the kind of lie that's being told. You know that if a Christian ever said that, they're just lying. And so
Yeah.
it's no less a lie when they go back and say, well, you see, Eved just means servant.
Yeah.
And so how did you deal with the semantic argument here? We'll call it. Did you ever think about this? Did you ever use this argument? Well, slave doesn't mean slave; it just means worker. It just means servant. Or did you find that argument, if you heard it, disingenuous? How did you deal with it? I can tell you that I my branch of the denomination didn't deal with it. We just said, yeah, that's slavery.
I think we would have said, oh, it would have been excused in the historical context of the day. And I think we mentioned this in our other show. All the other nations around Israel did it too. So they were just kind of blending in. They were just doing, everyone
Mm-hmm.
else did it too.
Right.
I was thinking now, this takes me right back to my seminary days because I studied Hebrew under Dr. John Sailhammer, who passed away a few years ago, but he was a great guy. I mean, I loved him. It was a fantastic teacher. He was probably one of the top three evangelicals in the world in terms of Hebrew scholar. I mean, this guy, he sight read from his Hebrew Bible. That was his Bible. Like he could read it like as fast as I could read my English Bible. He knew it. He knew the whole Hebrew vocabulary. He was one of the top scholars in the world. And he talks about this thing. What Joel's describing, I hate to get too technical, but it's something called the semantic range. So you take a word like eved, imagine that word eved, and you draw a circle around it. And inside that circle are all the possible meanings that it could mean. So you could have worker, servant, slave, a couple of maybe other words, and anything that goes around that word goes inside that circle. And what you're describing is one person taking the word servant from within that circle, knowing that there's maybe five or six other possible translations of the word eved, and saying this is the totality of what this word means. And there's an actual grammatical error that's being committed. I hate to bring this up, but this is really technical. It's called illegitimate totality transfer. And what it is you're taking all of the possible meaning and you're shoving it into one word and you're saying this is the totality of that one word, what it means. And that's an illegitimate move syntactically. You know what I mean? So Alex, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get too technical,
No,
but
no, no.
I
Get
studied
to
Hebrew for a
yeah.
long time. And
Get
that's basically what they're doing. It's called illegitimate totality transfer by saying eved only can mean servant and it can't mean anything else when there's clearly a semantic range.
No, I need you to get technical. Don't apologize for getting technical. That is one of the reasons you're here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get that technical. I studied a little bit of Greek. I did not study Hebrew. I don't know crap about Hebrew. And so, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
the same principle applies for Greek because I studied Greek as well. Yeah, and anytime you study any foreign language, It's the same thing. Any language really.
Any language,
There's
including
yeah,
ours.
yeah. There's
Yeah,
you put a word in there like dog. You could put a big circle around dog, and it could mean a lot of things. But you can't say, um, you know, basset hound. That's every dog ever is a basset hound.
right,
You know what I mean? That's illegitimate totality transfer, and that's basically what these guys are doing when they're saying Eved can only mean servant. It can't mean slave, even though clearly it can.
right. And like the word love, it can mean like I'm pleasantly disposed to this thing. It
Sure,
it
mean a
could
lot of
mean
things.
love is in deep emotional connection to, which is much different than like. It can mean uh, uh, sexual uh,
Yeah, gratification, anything.
gratification,
Yeah,
uh, and it could be a person's name. you know,
yeah,
uh, so there are lots of things that love can mean, and when a person looks at love in a context that they don't like and say, well, it can't mean that, it has to mean this other thing that I do like, they're being dishonest
right. And
because
it can't mean any of the other things
right.
that it clearly can. Yeah,
So
within that semantic range.
I
Every word has a semantic range. You can't stretch it beyond what it can be stretched. That's all. It's like,
right
a metaphor that you can't you can't misuse certain metaphors. It means what it means.
the conservative churches of Christ, by and large, we didn't play those semantic games. At least not with slavery.
You
We
just
would,
ignored it.
yeah, well, not so much. We would have said, yeah, that's slavery.
All right,
So
yeah.
what? That's
Well,
that's Old Testament. That's back there.
right. That
That
was then, this is now.
right. That's the path that we would have gone. We would have never played. In fact, I think the first time I heard someone play those games was when I was an adult. And you got to remember, I grew up in the
Yeah.
church, hearing everything. But it took a long time, and it wasn't someone within the churches of Christ that I heard it from, for me to hear someone say, "Oh, well, that's slavery doesn't mean slavery," and I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
That's
Of course
clearly
it
what it
does,
means.
because our church, we. I don't think I've ever heard anyone in the churches of Christ, and I've heard a lot of different perspectives in the churches of Christ about a lot of things, but we didn't play that semantic game.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
You didn't deny
slavery,
it.
right? We would have dismissed it on other grounds, not on the grounds of some kind of semantic.
Yeah, I think we would have done the same because I was raised Church of Christ. It would have been, yeah, argued from like a historical context
Yeah.
point of view.
Hmm.
That was then, this is now. It's the same argument for like the sacrificial system in the Old Testament. It must have been horribly gruesome and bloody and disgusting and all that. And somehow that covered people's sins. But they would say, well, thank God we don't have to do that anymore because
Right.
Jesus is our ultimate sacrifice, So it was horrible. It must have been gruesome and, hugely expensive to pay for all these animals and on and on and on. But thank God we don't have to do that anymore.
Yep.
That was then, this is now.
And so just imagine, because there is room to play the semantic game even with the sacrifices. You
Sure.
you could say that sacrifice doesn't mean kill. Doesn't what do you mean? It doesn't have to mean kill. Actually, sacrifice just means to devote to.
Yeah. To give
Uh,
up something that's important to you or
well,
whatever.
but once again, it could just be devotion. So this cow,
Sure.
we devote this cow to
Yeah.
God.
To
And so
God.
we're going to let it live. And even if we are starving, we will not kill this cow because we have devoted it to uh, God in memory of the life that He gave us. Right?
Well, yeah, Hinduism, basically, isn't it? The sacred cows of India.
Right. So, I
They're
mean,
protected because they're devoted to the gods of Hinduism.
you,
And you
you,
can't kill them, you can't do anything.
you see how you can use the word sacrifice, though, as
Yeah.
kill, or devote. It, but no one plays that semantic game because we know they're sacrificing animals. They're cutting them up,
Yeah, it's
putting them
very
on the
clear.
altars and cooking. Right.
Yeah, they're
It's
burning them.
it is just that clear with slavery as well. If you're trying to figure out which word Ived means, all you have to do is read the words around it. And this is what makes Joel's
Yeah.
example so brilliant. it
Yeah, the
just takes that
context
away.
answers it. Yeah, the
Right,
context, just the immediate literary context. It
right.
couldn't mean anything else
Just
other
put
than property
any
that's owned and passed down. And
mhm,
it's not talking about animals.
put any other word in there, and
Yeah, you shove any,
you still end up with slavery as we know it.
it
So,
doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work
all
except
right,
for slave.
let's see his point too.
Which is it's not slavery, it's indentured servitude. So, of course, there is indentured servitude in the Bible. Absolutely. Exodus 21 is talking about a fellow Hebrew who is a servant or slave for 6 years and going free in the seventh year because of maybe a debt they owed or something along those lines. That's indentured servitude, and it is certainly something that happens in this culture. Indentured servitude isn't something that we practice. We don't like it. We don't think it's good in our world today. Maybe some places in the world, but not really the Western world. But in those days, they did indentured servitude. And that was something that God also said, like, this is my law, is that you will have indentured servants. Again, not great, by the way, not fantastic, but also not exclusively the only type of slavery. And we saw that in that passage we just read in Leviticus 25. So whenever you get apologetics like this, that is either someone being incredibly disingenuous or they've heard an apologetic like that and they believed it and they didn't look very deeply into it, and that's forgivable. But then when somebody shows you Leviticus 25, just accept that it's not just indentured servitude that God is condoning in the book. Another popular Christian apologetic would be
Okay, so you mentioned indentured servitude, and
Yes. Sorry,
I
I jumped ahead. I knew he was going to get there.
that's all right. So I had heard some people trying to punt to indentured um, servitude, even in conservative churches of Christ. That wasn't the go-to most of the time, but I certainly have heard that before, and certainly recently. It's kind of lumped into the same semantic apologetic, and it fails for all of the reasons that we just talked about in the semantic apologetic. And so, sure, some slaves were indentured servants.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Which
what?
isn't great, by the way, he says.
Right, it's not great, but the answer would be, so what? I can say, all right, I'm not talking about those the ones that were
Yeah.
indentured servants. I'm talking about the other kind.
Yeah.
And so you know
Still
that you're
says slaves.
right.
Yeah.
You're still dealing with a dishonest person who knows enough to know that there were indentured servants in the Bible, but pretends they don't know that there were actual slaves in the Bible. It's just a lie. You can't know that much about biblical slavery. You can't know indentured servitude existed without knowing chattel slavery also existed, right? So, I don't think that people at that level are stupid. I think they're being dishonest, and they're being dishonest to themselves. And it's that same kind of in what's the big fancy word you used before about when you take a definition?
Oh, illegitimate totality
There it is.
transfer.
Illegitimate totality transfer. Same thing's
Yeah.
happening with indentured servitude here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I was going to say.
it's the person who is saying, since we know indentured servitude exists and God is good, that means that all slavery is indentured servitude. And
Yeah, and therefore not that bad.
yeah, right. Therefore, not that
Not
bad.
great, but it's, they had an end, there was an end date. They could only serve for 7 years and then they were free from their debt or whatever. They'd paid back their debt.
Right.
It's kind of a similar argument, like you said, to the last one. Anytime you see the word eved in Hebrew, it means indentured servant or servant. It doesn't mean chattel slave. It just means servant. So, it's the same hermeneutical fallacy. I was going to say, I think another reason why people defend slavery on this ground, because I read an article on the Wall Builders website a couple of years ago. This is David Barton, and he's probably one of the preeminent Christian nationalist, quote unquote, historians arguing that America was a Christian nation and all this. And there's an article, and basically the argument is God clearly has blessed America. We were a Christian nation. However, there was this issue of slavery. How could God bless America if we were a Christian nation and yet we still had slavery? And he goes into this really convoluted argument, and that's part of it. Is he says the slavery you read about in the Bible was only indentured servitude. That's all it was, and really the slavery in the South wasn't that bad. You know,
Right.
so that's why God still blessed America, because a lot of slaves became Christians. You know, David,
Uh,
they wouldn't have known about Christianity. You know, so
yeah,
come on,
I would say they didn't know about Christianity after they became Christians because they were taught a particular brand of
exactly,
Christianity, a very different idea of Christianity than, oh, say, free white people.
exactly, yeah,
So that's a little bit of history that I'm not going to go into right now because we
yeah, I
have
know.
talked about that on your show, and so
We've talked about it.
people, you should really be listening to Clint's stuff if you want to hear
A deep dive, yeah,
some deep dive
probably too
into
deep.
some of that. But yeah, right, so again, I would just defend my previous statement. You can't know enough about slavery to know that indentured servitude exists without knowing that chattel slavery existed in the Bible. And one of the reasons I say that is every debate I've ever had with someone on this subject, when you point out the scriptures, just as Joel has, where it's clearly chattel slavery, they don't drop the Indentured Act. They don't say,
Right, yeah.
okay, I see. I wasn't familiar with this before. So, yeah, I guess they weren't all indentured servants. Zero people do that in
Mm.
debates. This is how you know that it's a disingenuous argument. Let's hear point number 3.
But God doesn't like slavery. He freed his people from slavery. They were slaves in Egypt and he freed them. So obviously he's anti-slavery. How can you say he's pro-slavery? He's anti-Hebrews being slaves to other nations. He's anti-Hebrews being slaves to anyone but him, or each other, apparently, as far as like indentured servitude goes. But he's not anti-Hebrews having slaves. Like, that's just so clear. All you have to do is just like continue reading. Like, like they left Egypt, they were slaves there. Then they were told that they can have slaves. So yeah, we know that God doesn't want them to be slaves. That's all we know. Not that he hates slavery entirely. He certainly is okay with his people having slaves if you just keep reading. And this is probably the most popular of all the slavery apologetics, and it's this one.
Okay. I wanted to touch on the Hebrew slavery thing. This is one of the places where I think he was so close to another point but didn't make. But this is not one of those things that I wrote down, so I don't, I don't remember what I was thinking. But the idea that God was against slavery, again, I've heard this in live debate. God freed his people from slavery because he clearly hates slavery.
Yeah.
And
He's a great emancipator.
Yeah, and I just have to stop and I like you. Are you shitting me?
Yeah, really?
What are you doing? You realize I've read probably more of the Bible than you. You're going to go with this?
Yeah. That's your argument.
That's so wild. And I would even go a little bit further afield and say that God wasn't even so much opposed to other people owning Hebrews, because when God was mad at the Hebrews, he would throw them into slavery himself.
Exactly.
So,
He threw them into exile.
I mean, they ended up in slavery under God's watch because he wanted them there. So they would have had to exodus from slavery if God didn't put them there. But he more directly put them into slavery in the diasporas, the various Assyrian, Babylon and Persia. He would do this as punishment.
Yeah.
If you read the prophets and you read some of their really graphic descriptions of how God is angry and how he's going to punish his people. It's obscene, honestly.
Really bad.
Uh,
Yeah, it's the ultimate abusive partner.
oh man. And so,
Well,
you know, God, God is against slavery because he freed the slaves is just another, I think, lie. I don't think it can be a mistake. The argument is that bad. You would either for that to be a mistake, the person would have to be so unfamiliar with the Bible that you shouldn't even be debating with them, uh, or they're lying. And once again, same objection, same proof I gave the last time. When you're talking to that person, if they were just unfamiliar with other things that the Bible said about slavery, when you point it out, they would say, "Oh, okay, I didn't know that." So I guess
at least be honest.
right, but they don't. They don't.
Hmm.
They never drop the act. So they continue to say, "Well, God hates slavery because He freed um, the Hebrews."
Right, but as Joel said, God's not against the Hebrews owning slaves because they're still out in the wilderness listening to Moses preach in the book of Deuteronomy, and that's where all the laws first come down. Well, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, which lays out the fact that once you get into the land, it's okay to own slaves. So yeah, it's okay for them to own slaves, but it's not okay for them to be slaves.
Right.
So yeah, you can't
God
make the
was
same
freeing
argument.
His people for His purposes in the same way that He let them be in slavery for 400 years.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't pleasant,
you
according to what the narrative says. It was horrible.
right, you can't even say this is what I say. You can't even really say that He was against other people owning the Hebrews. He was fine with it for 400 years because He had, plans. So this isn't some general principle that God doesn't want His people to be enslaved. Uh, when He wants them to be enslaved, He wants them to be enslaved, and when He doesn't, He doesn't.
Yeah.
And the only reason He freed them is because He had some purposes for them that they needed to be free for. But it wasn't. It was never any kind of general principle that God hates slavery or even that God hates His own people being enslaved.
Yeah. Well, I never thought about that, but we talked about that with the William Lane Craig one, where he brings up this is a correlated argument that God allowed the Canaanites. That was the 400 years during which time they were more evil and evil and evil to the point where when the Israelites did come into the land after that 400 years, they were fully justified in wiping them out in genocide. But you think about, I never thought about the fact that, wait a minute, that also meant that Israel had to suffer for 400 years in Egypt, and that was somehow okay.
Yep.
For them, if you're a Hebrew living in Egypt, you're thinking, wait a minute, get me the hell out of here.
Yep.
Oh, you got 400 years to sit here as a slave building the cities for Pharaoh and all the rest of it, building, bricks without straw and everything else,
Right.
while God's waiting for the Canaanite sin to reach a certain point where it's like, all right, you've gone past over the line now. Now you're going to be wiped out, and I'm fully justified in doing so.
And think about all the options that God had in front of Him. So let's say being enslaved in Egypt for 400 years was one option, but He wasn't ready to give them Canaan yet. So
Right.
can you think of any other thing He could have done? He could have put him. He could have put him somewhere else. He could have left them in the
Anywhere.
wilderness, built a wall around it, a magical force
Yeah.
field where they couldn't leave and no one else could come in. He could have done that for 400 years. Any other option would have
Surely
been
better.
better. He could have put them into suspended animation for 400 years, right?
Cryogenics.
Right. But you look at all of the options in front of Him and He says, hey, wait a minute, I like this one. We will make them slaves for 400 years. Yeah, let's go with that one.
Yeah, I like that option.
You can't look at that and say that God was anti-Israelites being slaved. He was not anti-Israelites being slaved. There's no general principle that you can get out of this. And so I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Joel very slightly on that point. But otherwise, I think that I feel like we've covered that one. Let's hear his point number. Is this 4?
4, I think it is.
Right.
It wasn't slavery like it was in the antebellum South. Basically, the way the apologetic works is they go, You know, the way what you're picturing as slavery, remember the way you think of slavery? It wasn't like that. The quickest answer to this is, so what? Like, does that make it okay? Is all slavery that is like less harsh than that slavery that we imagine? If indeed we are imagining the same slavery you think we're imagining, by the way, you're basically trying to read someone's mind and saying, it's not the slavery you're imagining. You don't know what I'm imagining. It's a bad start to an apologetic conversation. But is all slavery less than that slavery all of a sudden fine now? There's no good kind of slavery. There's no spectrum of slavery that's just like, well, at some point when you cross this section, slavery becomes good. It's like slavery as a whole concept has got to be bad, right? We got to look at it. Taking away someone's autonomy is wrong. So owning a person and forcing them to labor and passing them down to your children and owning a human being as property, that all is on that spectrum. So it doesn't matter how harsh it was. This is the harsh side of the spectrum versus how lenient it was. And maybe the Hebrews are in here. It's still slavery and it's still condoned by God and it's still wrong. So like, what are you trying to sell the good kind of slavery to me as a Christian? Again, as the apologist, you are pro-slavery in this moment. You're saying there is some kind of slavery that is good, right? Because God said to do it, so it has to be good. Again, it's a failure. That being said, it could very well have been close to the slavery in America, right? Like this is slavery that you're allowed to do to people who aren't the same ethnicity as you. It's owning people as property, which is the same. Passing them down to your children, that's the same. You can beat them as long as they don't die. I think it seems like in the South, you probably didn't get in trouble if you completely killed your slave, right? But as I learned from Dan McClellan, there are laws on the books from the American South that maybe would have looked similar to the laws of the Bible, but people broke them all the time and nobody cared. That could have been happening in the Bible too. We don't know how this actually played out. So that's two sort of answers to debunk this. One is, how do you know it wasn't like that kind of slavery in the South? What is telling you that it wasn't like that? And secondly, even if it wasn't, even if it was more lenient, it still is slavery. It's still owning people for life. There's no good kind of slavery. God still fails. So the fifth slavery.
Okay. We talked about this a little bit on your show,
Yeah.
and once again, this is going to be kind of a time-shifted thing because I'm not sure that you will have that show out by the time this one comes out. So
No, it won't.
yeah,
So people are gonna have to go back on that.
yeah. So the thing that I like to do when this apologetic comes up, and it comes up a lot, and again, I think it's just being dishonest. This is by the time it gets to this argument, they're being dishonest, and you know it, and I know it, and everybody knows it. They know they're being dishonest. They're just lawyering their case to see if they can win the argument. Right? They're not
Jailhouse lawyer.
right. They're not
Just throwing anything at the wall to see if it sticks.
Yep. They're just trying to win the argument. They're not saying things that they believe or that anyone believes. So, but let's the thing that I tend to ask just to demonstrate this is to ask them about the differences between what they consider modern slavery and biblical slavery. And this shows every time that they're lying, and they know it. So you can just defeat the argument that way if you're just in argument mode and you want to defeat this argument. Do not accept that there was some kind of difference that would make it a different kind. So the first thing that comes to mind is race. People would say, well, American slavery, modern slavery was race-based. And in the Bible, that wasn't racism at all. There was no race-based slavery. But for that to even be a thought in their mind, they would have to look at American slavery and say, well, the only thing that made it wrong was the racism. And so if you fix the racism and keep the slavery, it'd be okay. Right? No one believes that, though, right? No one thinks that. It's a disingenuous argument. And if we look at, if we just wanted to inquire, question them further, I don't think there's any need to, because you've already exposed the lie.
Yeah.
You could ask, so hypothetically, if American slavery was based on nations as opposed to race, would that have made it okay? If American slavery was based on, winning a war and then, turning the losers of the war into captive slaves, would that have been different? Would that have been okay? Right? The answer is no every time. It wouldn't be okay in any scenario. It doesn't matter how you acquired the slave. I think he's going to make this point later, but it kind of goes with this one too. Well, maybe that doesn't matter, but the way you acquire the slaves is what matters, right? So the Bible says you can't kidnap a person. So clearly American slavery is bad because that was kidnapping.
That's what happened to the Africans.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would semi-agree with that. You see, I would agree in that I don't want to play semantic games. It was kidnapping. However, if I wanted to play semantic games, what I would show you is that there were Africans who sold other Africans into slavery, right? So it's not that America just goes to Africa and scoops up a bunch of people with a net. They go to Africa and in many cases they would deal with people who would turn over or betray some people into slavery or just outright sell them. But at the end of the day, the people being sold were not complicit with this. They didn't have any agency in the matter. So from their perspective, they were kidnapped, right?
Exactly.
Kind of like Joseph in the Coat of Many Colors and all that.
He was sold into slavery.
He was sold into
He didn't have a
slavery,
choice.
right? But before he was sold, he was kidnapped.
Exactly. By his own brothers.
So we could play semantic games like that if we wanted to, but once again, the same questions apply. Well, okay, kidnapping is wrong. Are you saying the only reason it was wrong is because it was kidnapping? Would it have been right if they were already the property of someone else and then they sold them? So the only thing that would have been wrong would be the original kidnapping. But you bought them fair and square. Kind of like being a fence for stolen goods. Well, you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't.
I didn't steal it.
Right. I didn't steal it.
I'm just the middleman.
That guy in the trench coat.
Yeah.
I didn't ask how he got that authentic Philippe.
That Rolex watch.
Right. I didn't ask him how he got that, but all I know is it's $20, and I made a legitimate
$5,000 watch.
right. I just made a legitimate transaction. I don't know what you're talking about. Right.
Doesn't matter.
That's the
I ask
whole.
no questions.
That is the whole kidnapping argument, and it's just absolutely absurd. And so it was different from America. I've actually heard people, smart people, intelligent people, say, well, American slavery was chattel slavery and biblical slavery wasn't.
Yeah.
These are
That's not what it is.
right. And what you have to do is say, I want you to look up the word chattel. Just look that up. Okay, it means property. All right, that's literally what it means. The Bible says so very clearly that these people can be owned as property. Biblical slavery, the kind that we're talking about, is chattel slavery. So you get an X by that one. That's not a difference at all. That's just you. Either you don't know what the Bible says, or you're being dishonest about the Bible says, and I choose dishonest, Because even if they didn't know it, when you point it out, they should say, oh, okay, well, I guess it was chattel slavery in the Bible too. They never say that. They never
Yeah,
say that.
I was going to say, I've heard a couple of nuances to this argument. One of them is like what he talked about. It wasn't that bad. And in fact, the law prescribes that Israeli masters treat their slaves really good to the point where, if they come to follow Yahweh, let's say someone from a foreign tribe that was captured in battle and becomes a slave in this is Israeli household, he or she becomes, a follower of Yahweh, converts to Judaism. And that's a good thing. So that's a kind of a similar argument to the slaves finding Christianity in the South, isn't it? It's like,
Hmm.
well, if they'd only followed the law, and if you treat a slave harshly, it's because you're not following God's command of how you should be treating slaves. It wasn't God's fault. It was the harsh master that they had, but it wasn't God's fault.
Well, the problem with that is God said that masters can beat their slaves, physically beat
Oh,
their
right.
slaves. So,
Must have missed that part.
yeah, see, there are only, uh, you know, some few circumstances where beating would be wrong. So if you beat the slave and they die inside of 2 days, then you've done something wrong as a master. But
Oh,
if you
right.
beat their slave and they live for, 3 or 4 days a week, and then they still succumb to their injuries and die, you didn't do anything wrong. Because,
Oh,
right. So,
interesting line.
you're right. So
Be careful
beating
how
was
hard you beat
allowed.
your slave.
Right. You don't
You can
knock
beat him, but just not.
don't knock their eye out. There's you can't do that. But the reason you have these restrictions is that it was okay to beat them, and so you had to say, well, here's the
Mm,
line where the beating becomes too harsh. Otherwise, within that scope, you can beat them any way you want to. That doesn't mean a master is being harsh. They are obeying the law.
right.
So,
And as you said the other day in our episode, a woman could be essentially a sex slave. So that's another aspect to it that you can then pass down to your son. Once you die, he gets her. If you're a woman, that's a horrible place to be. So is that okay? And I've asked this question of Christians. I would say, what if it was you and your family that was enslaved? Would you be okay with that, even though it was commanded by God and it was okay by the law? Do you want to live in that sort of a society? Would you want your children, your daughter to become a sex slave? And that's all legal, as you said, within this context of the Old Testament law. How would you feel about that as a father, as a mother? You would be horrified, and rightly so. Why wouldn't these people back then be similarly horrified and hate having to be in that situation, but with no way out because their property, they're owned.
well, right. You say as a father, as a mother, as a daughter who could be sold into sex slavery at any time.
Yeah,
But the wife, how did the wife feel? I mean, it's not like women had a lot of agency anyway, but a man buys a female slave. Having sex with his slave is not adultery. that's
yeah.
his, that's just his property. That doesn't count uh, as adultery. So Joel doesn't talk about female slaves. You said I'm just going to quibble with a little thing that you said that they could be sex slaves. No, they were primarily sex slaves. Maybe they could be other
Oh,
other
right, yeah.
things too, but that is first and foremost what they were. It's like a man buying a wife for his son, something like that.
Hmm.
They are bought for purpose. Um, so could a man buy a woman and not subject her to sex? That's possible. I doubt it ever happened because otherwise, why'd you buy a woman?
Right. And that's, yeah, like I said, there's biblical precedent. Obviously, Abraham and Sarah, she's too old and she's not going to have children. So, hey, here's my handmaid, my,
Hagar,
my Hagar, you can have her. Do we ever hear Hagar's perspective, her point of view? Like, no, I don't want this. I don't want to have sex with Abraham. Guess what? You've got zero choice. And
right?
that is what the whole Handmaid's Tale is taken from that passage where she's the substitute for the wife who cannot have children anymore. So we'll get a fertile woman in there who will then be able to bear children that then she has to give up to the master and slave owners, and have zero rights, zero say. She's being raped, essentially.
Right.
That's what happens.
Right. In the Handmaid's Tale, everybody is Hagar. Every woman is
Yeah,
Hagar.
yeah. They read that passage right before they rape the handmaids every month when they're, about ready to give, or where they're in that place where they're able to bear children.
Mhm.
You know.
All right. Yeah, it's truly disgusting. Joel,
Yeah.
let's see. Point number
What do you got next?
Apologetic, which is one of my favorites, is that it was already part of the culture. It was ubiquitous in the culture at the time. God just let them do what they were already doing, and he just sort of regulated it. They were already doing it, so he just sort of tried to wean them off of the horrible thing that they were doing by making it better. And we can see in other law codes where it was so much worse and they were doing it a little bit better, which isn't entirely true because sometimes in other law codes it was better. Not much better, but still slightly more lenient. And then the Hebrew one was worse. So that part of it's not true. But the idea that this was a ubiquitous part of their culture and God had to sort of meet them at their level in order to wean them off of something like this. And this goes hand in hand with progressive revelation. Also doesn't work if you're going to believe the narrative, right? Because unfortunately, you, the person that's defending slavery, is probably a Bible literalist. You have to believe that the narrative is true, that Moses existed, that these people did come out of Egypt as slaves. And so you also have to accept that the laws that we're getting all came down while the people were in the wilderness of Sinai. So it seems to have been probably within the first 2 years of them leaving Egypt. And I don't know how early you think they got the 10 Commandments, but they got the 10 Commandments pretty early. Right after that, they got the indentured servitude stuff, owning women as property for life stuff, and beating slave stuff. And then it was a little later that they got the Leviticus stuff, as far as it looks in the book. But it was all roughly around the same time because they were just in the wilderness of Sinai. You're telling me that they were already doing this? Why were they doing that? They had manna, right? Their clothing never wore out. They were just sitting at the base of Mount Sinai. No, this was the beginning of this brand new culture, and God was creating the laws for them, and those laws involved slavery. He wasn't adhering to some already there culture, right? Was he? How would that work? And he certainly didn't have to comply with the cultures around them. Furthermore, this apologetic fails on another level. God says, don't have other gods. But we know that the Hebrews were leaving a place where they were worshiping other gods. There were other gods there, right? The gods of Egypt, which they were used to worshiping, hence the golden calf. That's one of the apologetics of why they were doing this golden calf thing, right? So if God is meeting the people where they are and weaning them off of the thing that's ubiquitous in their culture, then he would have seen that they'll be worshiping other gods, and he would have said, hey, if you got to worship other gods, let me regulate your idol worship. But he doesn't do that. He says, this is a hard and fast no because it's morally wrong. I hate it. Don't do it. But with slavery, it seems like he's into it. It seems like he's perfectly cool with it. And also, the third sort of debunking of this apologetic is he never, in any part of the book, he never changes it. He never actually progressively reveals anything. Within the Bible, within that canon, he's always pro-slavery. He always condones it or is indifferent to it. If we get into the New Testament, it seems a little bit more like he's indifferent to it. I've kind of debunked 2 apologetics in one there. But by the way, this wasn't the first time that God could have weighed in on this. Back in Genesis, we also get the Egyptians giving slaves to Abraham. God spoke to Abraham. He was friends with the guy. He could have just been like, hey, no, we're not taking slaves. Don't accept the human beings, and definitely don't sleep with one of them without any mention of consent. Don't Don't do that for sure. Then in Genesis 17, he gives the circumcision covenant. And what does he say there? He says, you can circumcise the people that you've purchased from foreigners. Make sure that they're circumcised. Why didn't he say, hey, by the way, don't have slaves? Back then, he has so many opportunities where they're like starting fresh. Abraham was like, early days. We didn't even have Jacob yet, and Jacob becomes Israel, right? Why didn't he tell Abraham, the father of all Israel, we're not doing slaves? The circumcision is important to me. Also, don't have slaves. That would have avoided, if it were true, and this is just me going like, if it were true that it was already part of their culture, in the time of just coming out of slavery, it's because he didn't nip it in the bud, right? It just shows that God is just not concerned at all about slavery. It is ubiquitous in the book, and it's because the people writing it were certainly, totally cool with slavery. They didn't even think of slaves as people, and that is reflected in the God that they made up, which is the God that you worship, and that's why we're having a hard time with this conversation, because you won't just accept that it's people that made it up. So then we get...
Okay. I only have very little to add to that. And
Wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah, well,
He did a good job.
he did a good job, and he did an especially good job because he's the only other one who used the counter-apologetic that I use. And so I'm just going to highlight it. You notice how everyone is brilliant when they agree with you. So
idiots when they don't.
Yeah. So here's where I think his argument was just brilliant. There was no other culture. This is just the argument, well, that all cultures did slavery, and so it was ubiquitous and God had to work with it, is on its face a lie. He created a people that is separate and apart from the world, a holy nation, a royal priesthood, a peculiar people set apart from everyone, and holy to me. That's the charter. There were specific laws that kept that separation. You couldn't marry any of the women from the outside. You couldn't even eat with them because you have dietary restrictions that would make it nearly impossible for you to eat with them or for them to come over to your house and eat with you. It would break the kosher laws. You had to have circumcision, all kinds of things that separated them from anyone outside. So they didn't have, what influences from the outside would they have had? When they were freed from Egypt, they were a brand new, unique culture, nothing like anything on the outside, and they wouldn't even know what was going on the outside because they'd been in Egypt for 400 years. It's not like they're getting a newspaper for, stuff going on in other places.
Canaanite news.
Right. And so all they knew was Egypt, and what they knew about Egypt is what Egypt did was wrong. So when God starts giving them the laws, what slavery influence would the people have had from other cultures? It's a ridiculous idea. If God creates a culture from scratch, gives you a brand new law telling you that you can do some things and can't do other things, that's God creating a culture from scratch.
From scratch.
Right.
Yeah, and you said that a brilliant point in our podcast the other day when I asked you what about the God of the Bible? Because he said it just a minute ago. This is the same God that these Christians are going to church every Sunday and worshiping and singing praise songs about and claiming that they love and adore, and he's, loving and forgiving and merciful and all these great things that we wish it was true. This is the same God that commanded all these horrible things. Why couldn't he have created a utopia? You had nothing to start from except you said scratch. But then my argument was all you got to do is read the historical narratives of the Old Testament. Why was Israel constantly rebelling against these commands and going to the other nations and worshiping their gods and slipping into idolatry if it was such a utopia that God had to constantly punish them, constantly, to the point where he put them into exile in Babylon because they got so evil? Well, if it's a utopia, you don't want to ever leave. It's the best place on earth, but it wasn't. And God set up that constitution, as you say, that charter. Here's your chance to make it the best thing anyone's ever seen, and this is what you come up with.
Right. Um, yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. So I'll add just one more thing. Um, he he talked about having to circumcise the the servants, slaves uh, that they had. Why did they have slaves? When did they start enslaving people? But you had to circumcise them. Do you think that these slaves themselves were all right with being circumcised? These are adult people. You're going to do what to my penis?
Yeah,
All right?
yeah,
Which of the slaves was like, oh yeah, circumcision, that sounds good? It's not like they had any agency over their own body there. It's like, well, God said I got to circumcise you. I'm going to circumcise you.
yeah,
Just to put the lie to the idea that, oh, these people aren't property. Um,
yeah. It
yeah,
is crazy. I saw that thing on Seth Andrews' Facebook page the other day. Something like, "Why would God create the foreskin only to turn around and demand that it has to be cut off?" It doesn't make any sense. It's
well,
crazy.
for all we know, I'm gonna steel man the other side just a little bit. For all we know, God didn't create the foreskin,
No,
but that it was one of those unmentioned punishments and generational curses of sin. So when
oh,
Adam
never
sinned
heard
in
that.
the fall, then men grew foreskins, and God had
Yeah,
to
so
tell him,
Adam didn't have one,
right? No, no, Adam didn't have one.
huh? He
Look,
didn't have a belly button either, I guess.
the reason you haven't heard this argument is because I just pulled it out of my ass. But
It
this
sounds
is
pretty good though.
well, this is the equivalent of what Christians do to try to defend slavery.
Oh, okay.
So let's go with the next one.
Kind of a gross apologetic, the sixth one, which is that it's better for them, that this was actually an improvement. What would you rather? I've had Christians ask me, what would you rather, that you starve in a ditch or that you're taken in by someone's family and you become a slave? Like what would you prefer? There is a world in which the situation of slavery would have been a better scenario than whatever else could possibly happen to you. So regulating the slavery in that time might have been a good thing for a government to do. Let's not abuse these people, but let's have systems where these people can be helped, because it is a very rough world, rough and tumble society and economy to live in. But this is God. And unfortunately, I don't give God the same kind of generosity and leeway that I would give a human being, especially a human being in ancient times, ancient barbaric times, right? Like, God is timeless and wise beyond measure, the ultimate being. Why are we saying, like, yeah, the best he could do was be like, slavery, this is the best. If someone steals from you and they can't pay you back, slavery, that's the best option that I can imagine. Because I bet you, even you in your own home right now, you could imagine a better system, a better sort of like maybe socialist or welfare system. Or God could, I don't know, just always supply everyone's needs all the time, where they're just not forced to be in a situation where they're so desperate that slavery needs to be an option. He kind of half did that with the manna, right? And the clothes that don't wear out. He kind of was doing that, but he just didn't do it, he didn't go the whole hog, as they say. But this also doesn't make sense in the narrative, right? If they're at the base of Mount Sinai, if they're receiving manna and the first time quail, and later on they, want more quail, that was a wrong thing to ask for. But if that is what's happening, then why do we need it? Why is this the better option? They're all being fed anyway. Like, I don't understand. It doesn't really make that much sense. They also would have gotten stuff from the Egyptians when they left Egypt, right? Because God made them positively disposed to give them all their stuff. So if all the Hebrews had a bunch of stuff from the Egyptians and they were fed, slavery isn't something that would be better for them. It'd be something that would be useless to them right now. That's if you believe the narrative. If you don't believe the narrative, then we can see why these laws would be in place, but we can't really understand why God, who can conjure up food and has all the wisdom, like if you think that we have better ideas now, there is slavery in our world today, which we should try to eradicate, but there's a lot of cultures that don't require slavery. If we can come up with that, why can't God? He's the ultimate one. Our next apologetic.
Okay. Not much to say here.
Yeah.
Either. I would ask the listener to think about some of the people who would definitely fall on hard times, and maybe outside of the kind of people that would have rich land and or be able to do labor. So women who find themselves widowed or divorced. All right, they're kind of on their own. Maybe they go back to their father, but their father is also dead, or they they become the property of their brothers, but they didn't have any brothers. So this girl was an only child, and her husband is dead, and he didn't have any brothers. Right. So what is this woman going to do? All right. She's homeless and poor and can't get a job except to sell herself into slavery. Right. So saying that slavery is better than the alternative is to suggest that slavery is a good alternative anyway. She didn't have she doesn't have any choice. She's not thinking, well, I guess I'll become a slave. That's it for her. But let's think about some other situations. Persons with disabilities, which is someone I can imagine. So they can't walk because they were hit by an ox cart. Or they, they went blind, born blind, for whatever reason. They lost an arm in a arm wrestling contest where they really, really lost bad. So
that was a rough match.
It was a rough match. Bad decision there. So
get your arm torn off.
So what are they going to do? These are people who don't have any choices. If there's no safety net for people like that, well,
no welfare state.
You're saying that slavery is the better option. There is no option, and God can't come up with a way to help them. There's also, and let's just put this out there because I know that every Christian is thinking about this. There's the person who just wasted their life. Okay, they're drunk. They're drunk. They're smoking hashish, and they are useless. They can't hold a job.
Living on the streets.
They're living on the streets. They're going to have to go into slavery. And I would argue even for that person, there should be a safety net.
Yeah, there's no welfare state, is there?
Right, because, and here's the thing, and this would be my final category, and I would mostly put the people I just talked about in this final category, the mentally ill.
Where do they fit in?
They may be somewhat functional in society, but they've got an IQ of less than 80, which would be mental retardation, as we would classify it. What are we going to do with those people? It's not like they can go get a job. So the drunk is kind of in the same boat because they've drank and drugged themselves into a situation where they're no better off than a severely mentally retarded person. Um, so you're basically saying there are a lot of people in society that God didn't think about and doesn't give a shit about. And so if you happen to be one of those people, well, guess what?
Yeah.
Slavery. To say
Slavery's
that
your
it's
only option.
right, it's not a better option. It's the only option. And so
Yeah.
would you say to your daughter who has, uh, you know, made her life as a homemaker, and she's married, and her parents die, and then her husband dies because of some drive-by shooter or whatever. It was a good marriage
Drive-by
otherwise,
arrow.
right? And then so the bank comes and collects the house. She doesn't have a job. She can't get a job that would pay for the house. She doesn't have the education. She doesn't have anyone to
Yeah.
that can take her in. And so would the Christian come along and say, well, you can always sell yourself into slavery,
That's
right?
an attractive option
I mean, would anyone say that with a straight
to their
face
own daughter.
and say, you see, they're better off as a slave? If that was even an option, we would call the society wicked. But if
Exactly.
that is like the only option, we're saying, well, this category of person is just going to be slaves. Uh, if there was a God, he would burn that place to the ground, one would think.
One would hope.
And
Yes, a very unjust society.
and yet Christians are looking at it and saying, well, thank goodness slavery was an option. Am I right?
Yeah.
Slavery
Ooh,
is
thank
the
God
safety
for
net.
that.
Who needs Social Security?
Yeah, you don't need a welfare state.
God didn't give us Social Security. He didn't give us welfare. He didn't give us Medicaid. He gave us slavery.
Yeah. We
That's
came up with that.
such a better option. If we
Yeah.
thought that was a better option, why don't we have that as an option today?
But there's a selective hermeneutic because I remember reading what he talked about. I remember reading Shane Claiborne's book. It's called Jesus for President. And the argument basically is that Shane Claiborne makes is that he said if the Israelites had followed the law, which they never did, it would have been a utopia. And it's going back to that my earlier point, so it's saying, well, this is the fault of the Israelites, that it wasn't a utopia. It wasn't God's fault. Somehow God always gets off the hook, doesn't he? It's
Right.
never God's fault. He's never to blame. The law was perfect. But then when you actually look at the law, which is what he's doing, what we're doing, it's horrifying. It is really horrifying stuff that God commanded in the law. And they did follow it, and it's horrifying.
Right. So I think the next point is the one where I think Joel just missed a truckload of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm going to pull out the Bible. But I'm trying to think if I would have ever used this slaves were better off argument as a Christian. I think no. I think it falls into the same situation as semantic arguments. We didn't think anyone would be better off as a slave. We didn't think that the slaves from our time were better off as a slave. We didn't. No one believes that. No one who's being honest believes that. And so we would have just said, once again, Old Testament, God had his reasons. We don't do it today. We would have just done that. We wouldn't have lied to ourselves about, oh, well, they were better off, as if God couldn't come up with a better system. No,
Right.
he came up with slavery for a reason, and it wasn't welfare. All right, let's see this one. If it's the one that I think it is, then this will be fun.
Is Exodus 21, verse 16, which says,
It is not.
whoever kidnaps a person, whether that person has been sold or is still held in possession, shall be put to death. So a lot of Christians will tell you that means slavery is wrong, but it really is very clear what it means. It means that kidnapping is wrong. So if you kidnap a person and you sell them as a slave, like whether or not you've sold them yet or if you're still going to sell them, it doesn't matter. You're going to be put to death because kidnapping is wrong. You can't just take a person from their home and sell them as slave or whatever. Like that's not allowed. There's other verses that just say you can buy people as property. In the same chapter, you can buy a woman from her father and own her for life. Yeah, that's not kidnapping. That's buying a person who is the property of the dad and owning that property for life. And you can do that with foreigners. If the foreigners have been kidnapped, you didn't do the kidnapping, you just purchased them. So it's the kidnapping that's wrong. But if you want to say that this means that slavery is wrong, then you just genuinely have to change all the other verses. And that's like so much more work when this one is just clear that it's the kidnapping that's wrong. Why bend over backwards? Don't kidnap, but you can buy foreigners. Like, how hard is that? So for the ninth apologetic.
Okay. Because we have already addressed it, I have zero to say about it, but I hand the mic over to you if you want to add to it.
Well, we kind of covered that, didn't we?
Yeah.
The kidnapping was the illegal part, and then the same argument was used in Southern slavery, wasn't it? We didn't kidnap those Africans. It was the Arabs and the other Africans and so forth. They just, in fact, we gave them a better life than they would have had.
Right. It's not like
So it's kind of
anyone.
similar.
It's not like anyone was saying, "Okay, so how did you acquire these slaves?" They didn't care.
Yeah.
It's the same as the Rolex and the trench coat. So this is the one that I'm going to add to, and where I think it's not that I disagree with what Joel says in this next point. I think he just missed the biggest point that he could have made in the whole show, and so I'm going to
We'll fix it for him.
yeah, we'll take care of it.
I'm going to pop over to the New Testament because Christians hate when you just hang out in the Old Testament and just complain about all the horrible things that Yahweh did. So what do we get in the New Testament which is going to solve the problem? A New Testament apologetic that the Christians like to use, and it's Galatians 3, verse 28. The verse says, "There is no longer Jew nor Greek, there is no longer slave nor free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus." So I wonder if any Christians are watching this and actually think that this is a good apologetic. I think apologetics are often designed just to like trick people into believing what they already believe, like trick them into continuing to believe the thing. They're not really anything real that speaks to the problem or solves any problems. It's just like, maybe this could work. Throw this verse at it because this is so dumb. People are going to be looking for a verse that says, "Hi, I'm Jesus Christ, and I think slavery is wrong. Let's not do that anymore. Let's stop doing slavery." But that's not what's being said here. Even if it was Paul being like, "Jesus told me that slavery is bad," that doesn't happen anywhere in the book. That's what we're looking for. But what we see here is in Christ, from Christ's perspective, looking down, there's no longer Jew nor Greek. He sees them as the same. So Jew, Gentile, it's just people. But there's also no longer slave nor free. There are slave people. There are free people. Those things do exist. There's no reason to say that they don't happen. They certainly happen. But in Christ, he doesn't see them as any different. Same with male and female. Like there's just no male, there's no female. Everyone is just one thing in Christ, which is you're all children of God, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of your station in life, regardless of your sex. You're all just children of God. That's it. So if you're a Christian and you think that this works for you, you then have to say that you're no longer slave or free means that the Bible is saying that we're going to abolish slavery. So now everyone should be free and we should abolish the act of slavery. That's not what it's saying, and I don't know how you make it say that. But then you'd also have to kind of be a gender abolitionist of some kind, where you like don't see male and female, you just see people as people, and so you don't worry about that anymore. There's no trans issue, there's just trans people and they are people, and we can move on and we don't need to look at that anymore because there's no longer male and female. Let's just get rid of those categories. But you won't do that because you know that that's not what this verse is saying. This verse isn't about abolishing anything. This verse isn't saying we are the world. There's no Jew or Greek. This verse is saying that those categories do exist. God sees it as we're all children of God through Jesus Christ. So it's just a dumb apologetic that never works. So really, just stop saying it. Just stop saying it. All right. So as
Okay. All right.
What did he miss then, David?
If you missed some stuff,
Oh, okay.
you're
You're gonna
gonna
fix it for
yeah, I
me?
am. I am. I'm gonna try to do a screen share here that's different from this, and for all I know, everything's gonna break. But before I do that, I just want to touch on Galatians 3, and and say where I think he got it right. I think he treated this passage correctly. I think you can be
Yeah.
even more emphatic, but I think he treated this exactly correctly. The people who are using this passage are being disingenuous, and disingenuous is just a fancy word for saying they're lying.
Mm-hmm.
They're being dishonest. Okay, they don't actually mean what they're saying, because they will say neither slave nor free, and say, you see, that abolishes slavery, but they don't say Jew nor Greek, and so therefore that abolishes nationality. They don't say that. They believe that nationality still exists and is important. They don't say neither male or female, therefore God abolishes sex. In fact, what they say is that with male or female, he's not saying that they have the same abilities and responsibilities. That's not what he's saying. They have differences, not just biologically, but different roles. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So he sees the male as having a different role than the female. And so people are, the Christians, the same Christians that want to rush and say, you see, this frees the slaves, they want to rush and say, but this doesn't free the woman.
Exactly.
The woman
Still a
still,
patriarchal system.
right, still a patriarchal system. The woman still is subject to her husband.
Submissive.
She still can't speak in church. She's still saved by childbearing. She still can't have authority over men. So they are one spiritually in salvation, but they are not one in roles. And so, slave or free, sure, slaves can be saved just like a free man. That's in that way they're one, but they're not one in role. You see, the slave is still the property of the master. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't change that dynamic.
Right. And so
I was thinking, yeah, if you were a slave in the time of Rome and you became a Christian, and even if your master was a Christian, could you take that verse to your master and say, "Hey, master, according to Paul in Galatians 3:28 here, there's no longer any distinction. So see you later. I'm free."
right.
Would that work?
We know that wouldn't work because we know that that's not what happened. We know, in fact,
Yeah,
so
Philemon and Onesimus
this
didn't
is
work.
this is where I'm gonna jump in and screw up the video.
You'll never get it back.
Yeah, you know how these things go. So, can you see my screen?
I'm still seeing the video from.
You're still seeing the video.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the video. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry.
It'll be back.
And I'm just going to do
So you can pull up another screen.
little share. I hope this is the one I am trying to get. And now, what do you see? All right.
I see Bible Gateway.
Excellent. All right. It's free for all of you Christians who don't read your Bible and want to use the excuse, well, I didn't have a Bible. And I know that you have internet because you're listening to this show.
That's true.
Don't even. So this is Ephesians. Just a quick test for you. Never mind the historical truth. Who do Christians say wrote Ephesians?
Oh, Paul, of course.
Okay, you get a gold star.
Thank you. All those years of seminary paying off now.
You got it. So I am going to have to move some things around on my screen. Well, I'll try to do it.
I can see it.
Right.
You want me to read it, or are you going to read it?
Okay, actually, you can read it because I've got an overlay that's laying over part of
Yeah.
this. And so what I want you to read is verse 5. And now Christians know Ephesians 6. And the
Oh,
reason
absolutely.
they know it is because of this subheading right here, the armor of God.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
one of the favorite passages, spiritual warfare.
All right. And at the beginning of it, they also know children obey your parents.
Hmm.
Right.
I love that verse.
So this is not a verse that they are unfamiliar with. And I don't know how this didn't make it into Joel's video. If you would, verse 5-8.
Okay, Paul says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people, because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free.
Okay. Before we read 9, I just want to just look at some emphatic things here and just take all of the Christians' cards off the table. The first word in this reading is slaves.
Yeah, he's talking to slaves.
But
No question about it.
no,
Wait, who's he talking to? I'm confused here,
slaves.
David. No, servants. He's talking about servants.
Slaves.
It's like the NIV translators got it wrong.
Right.
It should have said servants.
And we can imagine that slave masters would read this part of the letter to their slaves.
Yeah.
So
Well, they did in the South.
this
for
is
sure.
exactly what they did. A key part of the slave Bible.
Yep.
Slaves, obey your earthly, what's that word?
Masters.
Masters. Okay. I think we know what we're talking about. And what were you supposed to do with them? Obey them. But that's not all. You were to obey them with respect. Just hang on the word respect for just a moment. What are the kinds of people that you respect?
Cruel, horrible master.
We're gonna get
Yeah,
there.
people.
We're gonna get there.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't let you
people
go.
who are, but someone who is worthy of respect.
Right.
You
You
respect
know,
someone who earns your respect and your trust.
right.
In theory,
Or
someone
maybe
with integrity and character and all that.
someone because of their position, a head of state, you might respect, or a parent, you might respect, or a teacher.
Yeah, an authority figure.
Right. You might respect. A slave master, is that really someone who is respectable? And if the job was to flee from slavery, get your freedom however you can, how would that be respect? And he says respect and fear. We can argue whether this is redundant, fear just means respect, or we can argue whether it's fear. I would contend
What it sounds like.
right. I would contend that fear means fear.
Yeah, be
Almost
afraid.
every time it's used in the Bible, it's same as if you say respect and fear the police, especially if you're a black man. You better do both. If you get pulled over on the side of the road,
Don't make any sudden moves.
Nope,
You
nope.
literally could get shot and killed right there because
Yep.
it happens all the time.
right, and you respect and
You don't
fear.
even need to make a sudden move.
Nope.
Wrong skin color.
Yep.
He was reaching for a weapon.
Yeah, he was just reaching for his ID that you asked him for, man.
Unbuckle his seatbelt.
But a judge would be also someone that you would respect and fear. You respect him because he's a judge, but you can fear him because at any time you walk in the front door, he can send you through the back door, and you don't see your job again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do some hard time.
He can fuck you up.
Yeah.
So
Bigly, as Trump would say.
yeah. So I'm just taking a little bit of time with that because this is what he's telling slaves to do to their masters. And this is the part where the wheels really come off of it. So we know who we're talking about. We know what Paul is saying. And maybe Christians find some wiggle room with respect and fear. There's no wiggle room here. Respect and fear with sincerity of heart.
Mm.
Sincere.
Just like you're obeying Christ.
Right. It's not that you're doing it so that you can, have a better life as a slave. If happy master is a happy slave kind of thing. It's not that. It's not obsequiousness in that. It's with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Right? Are Christians obeying Christ just so they can avoid hell? Well, yes, but they would say no. No, of course not. We obey Christ because we love Jesus, right? So in the same way, the slave was supposed to love their master, obey them.
From the heart.
Not only to win the master's favor.
Even when he's not watching.
Right. Even when the master isn't watching you, you should still starch that shirt as if Jesus was going to wear that shirt. Right. This Paul. And look, I don't believe Ephesians was written by Paul. Just for the clarity,
throw that out there.
But it's the Christians who would say that Paul wrote Ephesians,
absolutely.
and he wrote Ephesians. Every one of them would admit that he wrote Ephesians after Galatians. You can't use Galatians as an apologetic and also read Ephesians, and we know that they have, right? Mm-hmm. So again, I would say using Galatians as apologetic is just lying when Ephesians is sitting here telling slaves to be happy slaves and obedient slaves and viewing your masters as if they were Jesus. Now I'm going to let you read verse 9. In fact, I'll read verse 9. And masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him.
You see, it's all been fixed. You see, David, isn't that the answer? That'd be the Christian apologetic,
right? You see, verse 9 completely removes verse 5 through 8, right?
Yeah. If you're a slave and your master is a Christian, you better breathe a big sigh of relief, because he's now going to treat you with really in a good way, because he's a Christian, because God's watching him.
He's going to wait. No. I thought he was going to free the slave.
Oh, sorry. It doesn't fix everything. Yeah, I was going to say, if you were a slave in ancient Rome, becoming a Christian isn't good news, even if you had a Christian.
Okay, so you just dropped off there at the end. Just say something so that I know you're still alive. Okay. I have lost your audio, Clint. So if you were speaking along and you just know that I cannot hear you, what you can do is log out of Zoom, use that same link that I sent you, and log back in, and you'll come right back in. And I will just fill this space until we get you back. And all of this is assuming that you can hear me. So while we're getting that worked out, wait a minute, I heard something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. You're back. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Zoom just locked up.
Yeah. I'm not going to turn this into a podcast meeting bashing session, but as you know, I can go for hours on that.
Yeah, I know.
Hours. So if verse 9 removed verse 5 through 8 from the Bible, we might have something. But even then, we don't have much, because you still have masters in verse 9.
Yeah.
And we still have slaves in verse 9. Masters treat your slave, and they're not free. The master is still the master. The slave is still the slave. The master still owns the slave. All this suggests is you have to treat them better. All right. So
don't threaten them.
So let me just show where this does nothing to help the Christian. And I didn't mark this Bible passage, but if you go back to one of the first arguments where he's reading Exodus, you see the difference between the Gentile slaves and the Jewish slaves. So Jews, if you own a Jew, you don't actually treat them harshly. You don't treat them like slaves. You treat them like employees, essentially. But for the Gentiles, they're just your property. All right.
Yeah.
This is a direct parallel to that, because Paul was a Jew. He's not changing anything in the Jewish law. He's just syncretizing Christianity with Judaism. And he's saying, once you get a slave that's a Christian, or you convert them into Christian, then they become like Hebrew slaves were when they were owned by Hebrews. So now you're a Christian slave owned by a Christian. So you treat them at that higher tier of slavery. Except there's no jubilee, as far as I know, in the New Testament.
No 7-year, no 7-year release,
right? Because
no good news in it for them.
They're still Gentiles, essentially. But you treat them with that higher level, the good slavery, because they're now like you religiously. So they're your brother in Christ, in the same way that a Jew is still a brother to the Jew. And so you can read throughout the Old Testament the difference in the way you treat Jewish slaves as opposed to Gentile slaves. And Paul is just saying, when your slave is a Christian, then you treat them like a Jew would treat the Jewish slave, which is to say they're still your slave. That's all verse 9 does. So what they will do when you point that out, they being Christians who are dishonest, they would say, well, yeah, but this argument to obey your slave, or obey your master, only goes for Christian masters who are treating you properly.
Right.
And if they're not treating you properly, then you're not bound under this. But before I go to the next passage, let's look at the very first verse in Ephesians. Reading time for you again. Just read verse 1 through
1 through 4?
Yeah, 1 through 3. Let's do that.
Okay. You want me to read it?
Yep.
Okay. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth."
Okay. Obey your parents. Let's highlight the phrase after obey your parents.
Yeah. For this is right.
You skipped a phrase.
Oh, sorry. In the Lord.
In the Lord. You see, this is an escape clause, or what Christians see as an escape clause, because when I bring up to Christians, so you're saying that if you've got a parent that's beating you and sexually abusing you, you should obey them and not run away. And they would say, no. God has abuse in mind, and that's why you only obey your parents in the Lord. Your parents in the Lord. But if they're not in the Lord or treating you in a godly way, then you don't have to obey them, right? If they tell you to do things that are ungodly, you don't have to obey them. This is used as an escape clause for that. And so they try to take that escape clause and apply it to slavery, because this is, they would say, giving the ideal situation where the slave is honoring, like Christ, a slave master, and it becomes like the relationship of husband and wife. Wives, submit to your husband
Yeah.
as
Still
with
a
Christ.
patriarchal system.
Right, but it's, the husband kind of becomes a stand-in for Christ, and the escape clause there is when the husband is not fulfilling his duty as a kind of a stand-in for Christ, then you can leave. So I wanted to put up that escape clause, and then I'm going to let you read one more
Well,
thing.
I was just going to say the escape clause in Ephesians 6, the passage on children is verse 4. It's the same argument as the Christian masters. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, instead bring them up in the training and that instruction of the Lord. So the argument is, well, you see, just like a Christian master should treat his slaves well, the father should treat his children well and be a good, godly parent, and therefore his children will have no problem obeying him because, he's doing all the right things. So it's a similar kind of argument, isn't it? That would be the escape clause. You don't have to obey a horrible, terrible, abusive father, in theory. You would only obey a good, godly father. So how does that change a slave's situation? You're still a slave. Even if
Right,
you had the greatest master, you're still a slave.
right.
You have no autonomy. You can't escape. You can't go back to your home country or wherever you're from. You're still working for free for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say I should have let you read 4 from the beginning. You were correct. That really is kind of a
That's the
parallel there.
context.
Yeah, the verse
Anyway,
4 is the parallel of verse 9
yeah.
there. So my bad.
I preached too many sermons on that passage, so yeah.
Yeah. So let's see if this escape clause applies, and let's find out why I am disappointed in Joel for missing.
This is where he misses it.
This is where he misses it. And so if you can see on the screen, this is 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2. I've been using the NIV here all along. And
Well, there's your problem.
yeah.
So read the New American Standard Bible. You see, we'd have this solved by now.
No, it wouldn't help.
Okay.
Go ahead and read verse 18, and yeah,
You want to
just
read the whole passage or
yeah,
verse 18?
I'll stop you when you need to stop.
Okay, here we go. Verse 18. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you
Assuming
there.
we need to stop right
Yeah,
there.
we got to stop.
Wait, where's the escape clause, David?
Stop the tape.
I'm looking for it. It just got slammed shut in my face, I think.
Yes, just that little bit of reading takes away
it.
the entire escape clause argument. It's just erased because it clearly says, submit. And by the way, who is it talking to? Slaves.
Yeah.
Submit yourselves to your masters. Yeah, but the escape clause, shut up. Not to those who are good and considerate, or probably not only, that's behind the thing, but also to those who are harsh. And by the way, harsh, mean, cruel,
abusive. Yeah, whatever word you want to put in there.
Right. All right. So go ahead and pick up with 19. This verse written by fake Peter is not done abolishing whatever shit fake Paul had to say. Go ahead.
Okay. Here we go. 19. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God.
Okay. Sorry. Got to stop the tape again.
Again?
Again. By the way, I say stop the tape. You see, Rush Limbaugh, I used to listen to a lot of Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, yeah.
And
I was a ditto head.
Yep. Mega ditto. And so Rush would, be playing some bit of audio, and at some point he would just yell, "Stop the tape!"
Yep, I remember.
So that's where that comes from, people. It's never going to get out of my system.
Yeah.
For it is commendable, in the word commendable here means, it does not mean above and beyond. It means right. It is right.
It's the right thing to do.
Right. It's the right thing to do. If someone bears up under the pain,
Oh, I don't like that word.
the pain, can we just park there for a moment? What kind of harsh treatment are we talking about?
Yeah.
We're talking
Yeah.
about the
It's
harsh
painful.
treatment where you've got to bear under the pain
Yeah.
of unjust, and what is the word here? Unjust what?
Yeah. Suffering.
Suffering. Wow. Fake Peter is not done abolishing Fake Paul's escape clause at all. He says, because they are conscious of God. Like the slave is thinking, I'm being beat, my eyes being knocked out, but I'm gonna focus on God.
Yeah.
I'm gonna honor this man who's doing this to me. I focus on God. The female slave, this man is raping me for the third time in an hour. I'm gonna focus on God.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing that the advice to this person under the suffering is not escape the first chance you get. It's not put a knife in the head of your slave master the moment he goes to sleep. It's endure it and think about God.
Hmm.
How
Well, and there's
obscene
the
is
eternal
that?
reward, and I know we're jumping ahead, but that's basically what, isn't that what the white slave owners used to say in the South? They would read passages like this
It,
and to their slaves and say, listen, if it doesn't matter, I'm beating you, I'm raping you, whatever. However, you're gonna receive a reward in heaven someday.
take verse 20. I'm going to throw up a little in my mouth here. I can't even read these words anymore.
Yeah, it's bad. So verse 20, but how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. So as you're being beaten, raped, whipped by your slave master for doing nothing wrong, even just because he's cruel and abusive, God says that's commendable.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
if you take it with uh, quiet, sober acceptance.
Yeah.
Uh, if you can endure it, I just noticed this word choice. It's you suffer for doing good and you endure it. I mean, this is the kind of beating that maybe the average person can't even endure. Um, what does Fake Peter say? This is commendable
Yeah.
before God.
God
God,
is,
he doesn't. You know what's not commendable? You escaping and overpowering your master and running for your life. No, the thing that's commendable to God is if you stand there and take your 39th lash. That's commendable.
yeah. God's
Uh,
giving you a thumbs up.
Go ahead and read the last verse in this paragraph, and we'll move on.
I was just kind of throwing really quick. I read a few books when we were doing our episode on slavery. I read some books written by slaves in the South who a couple of them had escaped, and they wrote books about their experiences. And I remember reading about slaves talking about being beaten by their white masters. And I mean, we're talking horrific lashings to where your back were torn open. Imagine being on the receiving end of that, and enduring that. And God's up there in heaven going, that guy gets a thumbs up from me for enduring that horrible beating for doing nothing wrong, you know? Crazy. All right,
Right.
so I'll read the last verse, 21. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. Oh, he fixed it for you, David. See, Christ suffered unjustly, and yet he didn't complain. He didn't try to have any recriminations against the people who put him up on the cross. So should you.
I'm
Doesn't that fix it for you?
I'm so sick I might need to see a doctor. This
You need some
so
help, huh?
after all of the horror we just read from 18 through 20, 21 is almost worse. The first few words. So all the suffering, the beating, the pain you're enduring, to this you were called. You were
That's your
called, you
lot in life.
slaves, right? The reason you're slaves is not because someone kidnapped you. It's not because you fell on hard times. It's not because you were sold by someone who owned you for life. It's because this is what God called you to.
Mm.
How dare you try to escape any of this for what God called you? And God didn't just call you to be a slave. God called you to be abused by abusive masters. If that's the situation you're in, God called you to that situation. So don't think of this as unfortunate times for you. Don't think of this as the evil that men do. Don't think of this as bad luck. This is what God called you to. And why did he do it? How can you do it? Because Christ suffered for you. Let's just pause there for a moment. I always heard that Christ suffered on the cross for us so that we wouldn't have to suffer for our sins.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
he paid the ultimate sacrifice, the penalty for our sins,
but
so we could go to heaven.
it's not a sacrifice though, because we still have to pay it. So
Oh, right. No,
Jesus
the
paid
slaves did.
Jesus had to pay the fine, leaving us to pay the fine. So
Yeah.
it's double dipping. Instead
Yeah.
of saying Christ suffered for you so that you don't have to, it says Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example of how to
Yeah.
suffer. Right? This is
Yeah.
this is how
This is
you
how you
should
should
take your
suffer.
suffering. Right? That you should follow in his footsteps. That you should suffer like Jesus suffered.
Hmm.
That's what the Bible says to slaves.
Well,
That
like we said earlier, if you were a first century Roman slave, becoming a Christian isn't good news because Paul isn't telling the slave masters, like you said earlier, to free their slaves. And God wants to abolish the institution of slavery. It's evil, it's monstrous, it's wrong. If you become Christian, free your slaves. That's the first thing you should do. He doesn't say that. He says, go ahead and endure the suffering if you're a slave, because you're going to get a thumbs up from God, and apparently your reward is going to come to you someday in heaven. So you got that to look forward to after you die. But right now, you got to endure horrific, hideous suffering.
right. And by the way, this is the bulk of the Christianity that slave masters taught slaves. Right. This is
Yeah,
this is the kind of stuff they taught them to keep them in line. Um, this is just
very bad.
amazing. And so just think about the Christians who say, "Oh, that's Old Testament stuff. In the New Testament, it's changed," or the progressive revelationists that say,
Yeah.
God progressed over time to make it. This is so late in the Christian tradition. First Peter. I'll just ask you to put on your scholar's hat for a moment, and I'll ask you about both Ephesians and First Peter. Uh, when do you estimate that these books would have been written?
Well, the only thing that we could say for sure, this is the classic argument, they must have been written before 70 AD, because none of them mentions the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD. So what, 64 AD, something like that? I don't know the exact dates, but if you look at the quote so-called prison epistles, which Ephesians is supposedly one, isn't it? At this point, this is very late in Paul's career. He's in jail right now in Rome, apparently somewhere, under house arrest, and he writes a lot of his prison epistles. That's where he writes all these prison epistles. So quite late in his sort of writing pastoral whatever career. Yeah, so it's got to be somewhere before 70 AD.
Right, and that assumes that Paul wrote it. If you assume that Paul didn't write it,
Yeah, yeah,
is much later. But First Peter, almost nobody. Well, I say almost nobody. I think most critical scholars would say there's no way that Peter wrote either of the Peters,
yeah.
and that it would be even later in the Christian tradition. If you're being generous, maybe the 80s or the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it came, if you're not being generous, you can make a case for the early second century. Um, but the point is, it's late. It's late in the Christian tradition. So we've had time. Christianity has been on the scene long enough
Mm-hmm.
for the revelation to have progressed. And yet the only thing that we get is
Yeah, this is
Paul
the best they could do.
in Ephesians. Paul is saying, you see, Christian slaves are like Jewish slaves. Okay, so you treat them like that. But otherwise, yeah, everything's the same. And in Peter, even later, what you get is, oh, by the way, that fake Paul fellow was smoking it. This is not just for good slaves. He left this out. This is for good masters. This is for bad masters. This is for harsh treatment. You
Yeah, it
still
gets
respect
worse.
them like Christ. And so he is basically reestablishing every bad thing in the Old Testament slavery laws.
Well, and making
All
it
of
worse.
that.
Because at least with Paul, you could say, at the very least, if you're a Christian master, you should treat your slaves better. That's good. It's not saying we want to abolish slavery, but here's Peter turning around and saying, slaves, I don't care if your master's a bastard and he's horrible and abusive, you still gotta endure it. We're not gonna do away with slavery. It's not a monstrous evil. That's
Right.
the best they can do.
It's so when the Christian says, "Well, that was the Old Testament. This is the New Testament." What you have to tell them is, "Oh, you haven't read your New Testament then."
Right. It ain't better.
Because the New Testament slavery that's mentioned when it talks about slavery is just as bad, if not worse. It's just as bad, if not worse. And the thing that I think makes it worse is if you're a Christian slave under a harsh master, you're still supposed to love them as if Jesus. And
Mm-hmm.
what Jesus actually wants you to do is not escape and go to some sanctuary land. No, he wants you to stay there, endure it, uh, smile, and know that the reason you're there is because that's what God called you to be.
Yeah.
You,
And
you
that's
know,
what Jesus did.
you thought you wanted to be a plumber. No, uh, you what you should have wanted to be is a slave because that's what God has for you. And if you find yourself in that
Mm.
situation, and once again, we're talking about the worst kind of slavery. Peter makes it clear, whatever the worst kind of slavery is, if you find yourself in that situation, that's where God puts you, and you're
Yeah.
still
Don't
supposed to
try to
love
get
those
out of it.
masters. So the New Testament doesn't take away any of the Old Testament horrors. It adds to the
Yeah.
horrors.
Makes it worse.
And so this is Joel missed all of this. So,
But we fixed it for him.
yeah. So, look, he has one more, and he thinks that it's a pretty unique one. I dare say that a lot of people have not heard it. So let's just let him do his last one, and we will call this one. Now, do you see Joel?
Yeah. He's
Okay,
back.
let's do it.
Promise, this is the 10th apologetic, and this is my favorite one. And I think it's a unique thing that I found. I haven't ever heard anyone say this before. And I think it's a really important point to note. So, the apologetic that Christians use is that Moses allowed divorce due to the hardness of their hearts. They take a verse, they just rip it out of any sort of context, broaden it to mean more than what it's saying. What the Christian will say as an apologetic is that that counts for slavery now, too. And I guess I haven't heard them use it for anything else, but it can count for like all sorts of other laws, I would assume. Because he said that, we can use that as a catch-all for anything else that we don't like. Stoning children, like I don't know what else you would use it for, but it makes the whole like law and what God wants and everything very hard to know, right? It makes it all very dicey because we can't really confirm anything because some of it may have been hardness of heart stuff and other ones may have been what he really, really liked. But we know for a fact now because of the divorce thing that slavery is one of those things too. So that doesn't work. The truest way to read that would be that Moses allowed divorce because of the hardness of their hearts. And that's it. And then Jesus goes on to change the way that divorce is allowed. It's still allowed, but he changes the reasons for it. He updates that. That's it. That's all that's happening in that passage. And there's other laws like this. He doesn't say anything like that. But I have a more direct way to debunk this apologetic. Now, Leviticus 21, we learn about the role of the priest and who the priest is and the standard that he has to live up to. The priest must be holy. Like, they can't have gashes in their flesh or anything like that. In verse 7, it says, "They shall not marry a prostitute or a woman who has been defiled. Neither shall they marry a woman divorced from her husband, for they are holy to their God." So if God's allowing divorce and he's allowing people to sleep with other people for different reasons, the priests aren't involved in that. They can't even sleep with someone who's not a virgin. And it says, "For they are to be holy to their God. You shall treat them as holy, since they offer the food of your God. They shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy." So they are to be holy the way God is holy. They are the holy people. I just can't drive this point home enough. This is a particularly harsh passage. In Leviticus 21:9, it says, "When the daughter of a priest profanes herself through prostitution," which in this case is just her sleeping around, by the way. This is her not being a virgin and having slept with someone before she got married or something along those lines. "She profanes her father, and she shall be burned to death." This is how holy this man has to be, that his daughter, if she sleeps around, she must be burned to death. "Indeed, no one who has a blemish shall draw near, one who is blind or lame, or one who is mutilated or deformed, or one who has a broken foot or a broken hand, or a hunchback or a dwarf, or a man with a defect in his eyes, or an itching disease, or scabs, or crushed testicles." He has to have perfect balls, and I've done a lot of jokes about that. He must be basically perfect. "He shall not come near to the curtain or approach the altar because he has a blemish, that he may not profane my sanctuaries, for I am the Lord, I sanctify them." So it goes on even into Leviticus 22, where it lists all the things that the priest must adhere to. He has to be holy the way God is holy. So the hardness of their heart divorce thing can't apply to him. He is holy. But then there's this weird thing I noticed in Leviticus 22, and I'll start in verse 10 so we can work up to it. "No lay person shall eat of the sacred donations. No bound or hired servant of the priest shall eat of the sacred donations. But if a priest acquires anyone by purchase, the person may eat of them, and those who are born in his house may eat of his food." If a priest acquires anyone by purchase, so the priest may buy slaves. The holiest of all the Hebrews, the one that's above all the rest of them, the one that is holy the way that God is holy, they may own slaves. Their balls must be perfect. We must burn their daughters alive if they sleep with more than one man. But they may own slaves. That's all we need, right? That's all we need to say that, like, it doesn't matter about the hardness of the heart thing. That debunks that idea. God is allowing this because he's okay with it.
And I'll go ahead and end it there. I think this is an excellent point.
Yeah.
This
I've
is
never heard this one.
right. This is a man,
Who they get?
the priest, who has to be on a higher level.
Yeah,
he has a
it's not
he has a different standard than the rest of the people, and that's the thing. So he lists all of the things that the priest has to be, and all the things that the priest cannot be. This did not apply to the average person. This is just for the priests. You've got to be even holier than them. Okay, so it's a separate set of laws for the priests. And Joel is correct. What the laws come down to is you have to be pretty much perfect. You have to be physically perfect. I mean, think about it. You've got a priest who's doing everything right, and he's perfect in every way, and he's out tending to things, and he gets kicked in the balls by a mule. He's nutted by a mule, and
Hmm.
now he can't be priest. He can't do priest things for no other reason than his balls got messed up. That's how perfect this guy has
It would
to
have to
be.
be.
And so in within that sphere of perfection, and this is God's idea of perfection, not man's idea of perfection. Within God's sphere of perfection, this perfect person can own other people as property.
Yep, and
He,
that's
he
okay.
can do chattel slavery. And so this completely eviscerates the idea that God wasn't in favor for it. He just allowed it and regulated it. No, he was in favor of it.
And
Because
it doesn't affect the priest's sort of holy status at all.
right, that's right.
It
Because
doesn't affect that at all.
if he wasn't in favor of it, the priest wouldn't be able to do it. If it was just
Exactly.
something that was being allowed for sinful people, um, the priest wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, it's,
He still
yeah.
wouldn't be able to do it. But the reason the priest can do it is because God doesn't have a problem with it. In fact, he seems to favor it
Yeah, it's
as opposed to
okay.
other systems. Because
Well, Mike,
it's not like
yeah.
there aren't other systems that he could have
Right.
chosen from.
Yeah. And I like what he said earlier about Wayne, go back to Genesis. Abram, before he was even Abraham, was allowed to have slaves. Why didn't God just say, okay, stop right here? We're going to set up a whole new thing. We're not doing the slave thing from the beginning, even before there was even such a thing as the nation of Israel, but he didn't. So this fits right into that same argument, doesn't it?
So that this for me, I don't know how this is going to sound when it's all done and people hear it, but I think the collection of stuff that you and I have said on top of what Joel has said might well be the best um, video um, on slavery in existence.
Yeah.
I think
You've gone over and above, I think.
and the reason I say that is because it includes a lot of arguments, counter apologetics that a lot of people haven't heard, right?
Right.
And so that's it makes it very useful. It breaks it down in a very clear way. I just don't see, other avenues that anyone could use to even try to defend uh, Christian slavery. And so I'm going to ask you to finish up by telling me, let's say that, we time travel.
Hmm.
I bring this video back to you, back in the 80s, say, and you watch it. Uh,
As a
it
good evangelical, you mean?
as a good evangelical,
Yep.
what would the 80s version of you say? You're still preaching. Let's just assume you're preaching. I don't know what the schedule would be, but let's say you're still preaching. You've got a sermon coming up that's going to touch on some of the passages, and you've got your arguments to exonerate God. But you watch this video first. Now, what do you say?
Yeah, I think I've got a real problem. Like you said before, if you're going to be intellectually honest with yourself and with what the text actually says, you have to admit that pretty much everything he talks about is correct. But of course, I wouldn't have said that as a good evangelical. I'd have probably, dove into the commentaries and found something to buttress the argument, in a quote unquote reasonable sounding way to argue that no, he's wrong. It's not as bad as it sounds. There is an escape hatch in the New Testament. There's always a way out. And like I said, I discovered that God is never to blame. He always gets off the hook, no matter what. There's always an escape hatch for God. And I used to employ it as an evangelical. And even to the point of saying something like, well, we don't understand everything now. Yes, it's true. We have a finite mind and all the rest of it. But someday, David, someday in heaven, we're going to have the chance to ask God, what was that all about? And we'll get an answer someday that will satisfy every yearning that we had, every problem that we have or had will be solved someday. So just, you got to wait till heaven. We just can't, I can't give you an answer right now, and that's the ultimate trump card, isn't it? You just the old wait till heaven, and we don't have an answer now, but more will come out later.
Right.
When all else fails, when the cognitive dissonance just becomes too much, God's going to answer someday in heaven.
So in 83, I would have been turning 13.
Mm.
So I should have probably said the 90s to make it parallel
Yeah, I was going to say I
me.
was a kid then.
Right.
In the
So,
90s, I was a pastor in Portland.
right. I was still preaching a lot. Don't get me wrong in the 80s, but I should have said, between 90 and 95, 90 and 2000 in
Yeah,
there. Um, so that said, I think what I would have said, and I haven't thought about this in advance, and so I'm kind of thinking about this in real time, just like you.
that's a good
Um,
question.
I got my notes ready. I got all the counter the
Yeah, counter
defeaters.
arguments.
Yeah, I've got all of that prepared, and then I watched this video just before I go on stage. Um, the problem with this video is that all of your escape hatches are closed.
Right.
And you look down your list and you say, this is if you're being honest, and you say, okay, well, I can't do that one, I can't do that one, I can't do that one. Oh, but I could do, oh no, wait, further down there's that one, I can't. There's nowhere to
There's no off
go,
ramp.
right? So all of the stuff that you had to exonerate God is gone. And I can tell you right now, I did not know the moral argument at that time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have been able to do that. But let's just say that someone else, one of my Christian friends, also time traveled and says, okay, I know that David watched that video. I'm going to slip him the moral argument.
Yeah, this will solve this problem.
This will do it. And so I look over at the moral argument. That's the only thing I'm left with. And that's not even an argument. All I could say is that, congregation, and let's say the congregation also watched the video before my sermon, which would be devastating, honestly.
Oh yeah, you don't want to do that.
So I would get up and I would say, okay, congregation, this guy Joel, he has no way to say that slavery is absolutely right or wrong. This is just his opinion. That's just his opinion. Why should we care about his opinion? We don't care. He's nobody. And so,
worldly wisdom.
right. I mean, that's just worldly wisdom. And so if he can't give a reason for why it's wrong, that's objective, and my congregation would have used terms like that. And so they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. Then we can just dismiss it. It's like telling the jury, all that evidence that we saw, the bloody knife, the fingerprints, and then the gun, and then the gunpowder residue because he stabbed and shot the guy, and the money in the wallet that can be traced directly to the guy, was carrying. Ignore all of that because the police made a typo when they were doing the record.
Yeah.
And the jury, what are they supposed to do? The law says you have to ignore it all.
Yep.
But the thing is, the person is guilty. So if you're trying to obey some arbitrary law, you got to say not guilty. But if you're trying to do justice, you have to say guilty. And so that's what the moral argument does to the Christian. They see all of this. They know that God is guilty. They know slavery is wrong, even biblical slavery, even back then for those people way over there. They know that's wrong. They know the New Testament doesn't help them out and it makes it worse. But the lawyering of the moral argument says, throw out all that evidence
Yeah,
and
ignore
and
it.
and, and now make your decision. And that puts the Christian in an impossible decision, because then they have to decide, well, do I obey God and just stick with God no matter what he did? Or do
Yeah.
I side on what I think is right? So the moral argument, and that's why I said earlier, it's just an attempt to lawyer your way out of a problem.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, I was going to say one thing I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have gotten up there and said, "All right, people, this guy Joel's 100% right, and I'm no longer a Christian, and I don't think you should be one either." So you can't do that and keep your job as a pastor. Your job is to allay their fears and answer their questions. You're the expert. You've been to Bible college. You've been to seminary. You know Greek and Hebrew. So that how do you get that's the pastoral problem, isn't it, that we'd have faced as we were about to step into the pulpit. You're not going to tell these people, listen, this is all bullshit, man. I don't believe in any of it anymore. I'm an atheist now. You're not going to say that. Well, certainly you couldn't keep your job as a pastor if you did that. I mean, I was kind of infamous in my sermons toward the end as I was getting into progressive Christianity. I started preaching more like multiple point of view sermons. So let's say you had a passage, I might give them, let's say, three or four interpretive options.
mhm,
How do you interpret this passage? Well, one option is this, another option is that, another option is that, and then I say you decide which option you want to go with. I'm not going to tell you which I think is the quote unquote right one. I'll tell you what, that pissed so many people off when I did that. I'm thinking I'm doing them a favor by
mhm.
showing them, hey, there's more than one way to interpret this passage here, and I'm going to give you the four options, and I'm not going to tell you which I think is the right one. Oh man, the sort of hate mail that I got was unbelievable. You can't do that. You got to tell us what it is, tell us what the answer is. So that wouldn't have worked, and it doesn't work if you're going to be intellectually honest, at least with the text, I think.
So I just realized what I would say.
Ah,
Now, the fact that it took me this long to think of it means that maybe I wouldn't have thought of it then. But
yeah.
if I was
You
my
didn't have time. If you're supposed to be in the pulpit now.
right, cause my other answer would have been, I would have faked a sudden illness and went
Right.
home.
I was gonna fake a heart
Yeah,
attack.
I can't do this sermon today, folks. I'm sorry,
I never
I
thought of that.
messed up. But
Damn, I like your answer
yeah,
better.
but
Can I just I'll fake a heart attack and you can fake, that you're dying or something.
I think if I'm thinking at my best, what I would say in that situation is, you've heard the presentation uh, of a person, who sincerely believes what they're saying. And let's even say for a moment that everything he says is true.
Yeah, just
The,
grant him
the,
that for the minute.
right, just grant all of it. Uh, you, Christians, are not called to judge what God does. You're not even called to like what God does. You're certainly not called to understand what God does. You are called to obey, to love, and be faithful to the end.
Mm.
That is what you are called to do. Are you willing to, right here and now, turn away and not love, not obey, and not be faithful? Are you actually, after one presentation, willing to throw your God who died for your sins under the bus because you don't like his attitude about slavery? Are you willing
Mm.
to do that? Because door number one is faith in heaven. Door number two is the other place.
Mm. You
Uh,
don't want to go there.
that's my sermon.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's kind of that's a good, probably a better variation of my we'll get the answer someday in heaven. It's an extension of that sort of similar line of thinking, isn't it? We don't understand what God does half the time. God's ways are higher than our ways, David. It says that right in the Bible.
yeah.
We don't understand. We can't know the mind of God. So therefore, it's not our place to question these things. It's our duty to love, obey, and serve and be faithful, blah, 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 and stay the course.
Yeah, that's. I think at that point, that's all you got. And with, by the way,
Yeah.
I think that's the best argument for Christians today. It's funny they don't make that argument. That's
All you can do.
that's not what they say. They try to deny the facts. They're just fact deniers. They're Bible deniers. They
Yeah,
are
they're
logic
justifying
deniers.
everything.
Right. And what they really should do is grant everything the atheist has to say about it, and just lean on the choice. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I'm going to be
Doesn't
Abraham.
matter how much cognitive dissonance there is.
Doesn't matter. If God tells me to kill my kid, I'm going to take my kid out. I'm going to have a long knife, and I'm going to be prepared to kill him. That's all you can say, and frankly, that's what you should say. You should be intellectually honest and say, you are exactly right, David, about slavery. Joel, you're exactly right about slavery. Yes, even in the New Testament, it was pro-slavery. You're exactly right about that. But that is not why I serve the Lord. And
What's the problem?
right. And so maybe God was pro-slavery just to test you, to see if you would make slavery your God as opposed to making him your God. You can do that kind of apologetic. That's I think that's all you got. And frankly, I think that's a good argument from the Christian point of view. I actually think it's a winning.
Yeah, it's really all you've got.
I think it's a winning
what's the
argument, though.
alternative?
Right.
Because the alternative is it's what you and I did and so many other ex-evangelicals. I could no longer in good conscience serve the quote God of the Bible. He's a monster.
Right.
You know, for these reasons we've just spent 2.5 hours articulating. There's no way I could walk into a church on a Sunday morning and sing a worship and praise song, all the while thinking in the back of my mind, wait a minute, this is the God who commanded genocide, who condoned slavery and all the rest of it. No, and sends hideous suffering in our lives. I can't worship.
Oop, you just
I'm out of it.
there you
I'm
go.
out.
All right. You had cut out for just a second, but it was only a second.
What's that?
You had cut out for just a second, but it was only a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got out for that very reason, rather than just burying our heads in the sand.
Right, because the alternative would be to know what I know, and just think back for a moment. I'm in a time when it's most likely that I'm a slave. So I'm a slave preacher preaching to other slaves. That happens. I would have to tell my congregation the reason we're slaves is because that's what God called us to. I couldn't do it.
The Bible says.
With my mental makeup right now, I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at the face of another slave and say, yeah, but God wants you to be here. Yeah, but they beat me and they raped my wife. But that's when God really commends you.
Yeah, you're enduring unjust suffering.
I can't say that. I can't. And frankly, if you're a master in that time and you're owning slaves and you watch this video, I don't see how you go back out and face your slaves and say, okay, now tend the north part of the field. I don't know how you do that. And so for me, it's if the preacher is appealing to me the way I appealed before, and the way I say is still the best argument for them, if they make that appeal and I'm in the pews and they're saying the only question is who's on the Lord's side, and I would have to raise my hand and say, yeah, not me. I'm out. I'm out. I believe in this God. Mm-hmm. I see this God. I fear this God. I know that I would be giving up heaven and I would be setting myself up for hell with this God, but I cannot serve this God, even if I believed in him, because the thing I put my trust and faith and hope in was a good God. And I don't believe that this God is a good God. And you might say, oh, no one would do that. No one would dare risk hell because of that. And you're wrong. You're wrong. It's done every day by Christians. Think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
Christians don't just believe in Yahweh. Christians also believe in Beelzebub. Okay, they believe in Lucifer, the god of this world. They believe in Lucifer. They believe he is a godlike being, and in fact, in most ways that we commonly think of, he is a god. All right, we believe that. They believe that.
Yeah, they
Now,
do.
you just ask
Uh,
them, let's say there was a new revelation and the God you serve was actually defeated by Lucifer. So in that great war, Lucifer actually won. Do you bow down to Lucifer? There's
mm,
not a single Christian in the world who would say they would bow down to Lucifer. They would oppose him to the death because they
hmm
think he's evil. They believe in him. They even believe the story that he won. They've still not bowed down to him. And so when I say that, Christians are like shocked. You see, you wouldn't even believe in God if he was real, if he came to, I wouldn't worship that God. I would believe he existed, but I wouldn't throw
Yeah,
my
that's a far
support
cry from
behind him
worshiping.
because I see your God the same way you see Satan, the God of this world. And I wouldn't worship your God any more than you would
Yeah,
worship
if he were
Satan.
the yeah. Well, going back to your earlier point, what did the black preachers tell their slave audience in the Civil War?
Uh,
What was their message?
the black preachers told their slaves exactly what they were taught. So you have to understand, black preachers were set up by white preachers. Back in that time, now, I'm not saying
Yeah,
that
you weren't allowed
some
to be a
right. I'm not saying that some didn't rise up, naturally, and you get the Church of the Fields or something like that. That would not have been
yeah,
recognized by and large. Um, and so, in the days when you started seeing black churches pop up, the reason they popped up is not because black people wanted their spiritual independence. It's because white people didn't want them worshiping in their churches. So the black churches were built by white people, and the white people established black pastors in those churches that
exactly.
would be considered official. And so what the black pastors taught their congregants was what the white masters taught them. that's that's what they would have taught um, in churches. And you would very seldom, I think, have seen black pastors teaching their congregants anything else, because if the white masters got wind of it, they would have just killed them. They would have just
Yeah, it
slaughtered
was
them.
allowed. Yeah, but it was sanctioned by their white masters. Yeah, so they had to toe the party line in effect.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
they
um,
couldn't say rise up against your white masters because this is horrible and evil and wrong, and we need to overthrow this terrible system. That wouldn't have lasted long, would it? If
right.
that would have been their message.
All right, folks. Look, this is slavery. When you've watched this video, you're fully armed to dive into this battle. I'm not going to, mostly because, like I said, I don't want to platform uh, people who want to defend slavery, any kind of slavery from any era. That said, if someone wants to start an email conversation with me or have a conversation with me offline, um, I would probably do that. Um, but Clint, tell people, tell people how to find you and where they should send their hate mail.
Yeah. You said the other day you don't get enough hate mail, so I need to get some hate mail too. I feel left out now.
You are a
So if
man
someone
most
wants to
blessed.
send me hate mail, yeah, hate mail at dismantlingdoctrine@gmail.com. You can also find the show Dismantling Doctrine Podcast, obviously Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, those kind of places. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find my public Facebook page, find me on Threads, which is tending to be where I'm more active now because there's a lot of Trump evangelicals on there that I'm quite having a good time engaging with. So that's pretty much the best places to find me or send your hate mail to. That I want to hear it.
All right. And what shows are you working on right now?
So the next episode I've got coming out, I just did one on Vance Belter, talking about how he was radicalized by the New Apostolic Reformation. I've been doing stuff on Project 2025, Project Esther, a lot of the stuff on the Christian right. But I've got one coming up where it's going to be talking to a guy, he's Canadian, Lucas Wilson, who survived conversion therapy at Liberty University Jerry Falwell's Liberty University, and now he's come out obviously as a gay man, ex-evangelical, has a fascinating story of what it's like to go through conversion therapy as a gay Christian, trying, God trying to make you straight. So that's a fascinating discussion with Lucas Wilson coming up soon.
All right, perfect. And if you want to ever shoot me over a link to some video that you've posted on your site, I'll be glad to repost it so that my audience can see it as well. As for
Yeah, well, yeah.
no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was gonna say, yeah, I tend to do a lot of stuff on political stuff. I've got an interview coming up with Frank Schaefer, which is, I love talking to Frank. I've done a number of episodes with him, and I've been posting a lot of shorts on my YouTube channel. You can find those where guys like Frank Schaefer and Matthew D. Taylor talk about what's going on in terms of the Christian right, Christian nationalism, Christian Zionism, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm really excited. I always love talking to Frank. He's one of those guys where you don't have to interview him. You just sort of steer him and he just goes. Kind of like
Hmm.
talking to you. And I was going to say, we got our episode where I had you on my show. So that's going to be coming up as well.
All right, and what's your YouTube channel name?
Yeah, people can just look it up, the Dismantling Doctrine podcast on YouTube.
Okay,
It's the
perfect.
only one.
And as for me, well, you know what to do. skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log into your discuss account and discuss away. You can also send me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. Until next time, I will see you in the comments. And in the meantime, we're out.